A 12-year-old girl takes a baby to the hospital. She says 2 words. The police arrive immediately and arrest her stepfather. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Get comfortable, and let's begin. The glass doors of Mercy General Hospital hissed open as a gust of cold night air swept through the empty lobby. Inside, the soft glow of fluorescent lights illuminated the sterile, quiet space. Nurses at the reception desk glanced up, their conversation fading as their eyes landed on a figure standing just beyond the entrance. A girl, barely 12 years old, shuffled in, clutching something tightly to her chest. Her shoes were soaked, leaving small puddles on the polished floor. She wore an oversized hoodie that hung off her small frame like a protective shell. But it was her face that stopped everyone in their tracks, pale with streaks of tears cutting through dirt on her cheeks. "Sweetheart, are you lost?" The receptionist's voice was kind but cautious. The girl shook her head. Her lips trembled as she clutched the bundle tighter. The faint sound of crying escaped the folds of the tattered blanket she was holding. A nurse approached slowly. "Is that a baby you're holding?" The girl looked down at the bundle in her arms, then back up, her gaze darting around the room as if she expected someone to burst through the doors at any moment. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Help him." The nurse carefully reached out, her hands gentle but firm. "Let's take a look, okay?" After a moment of hesitation, the girl allowed her to take the baby. The nurse's breath hitched when she unwrapped the blanket, revealing a newborn. Small, fragile, and trembling. His skin was pale, his tiny fists curled tightly against his body. The girl's eyes welled with tears as she whispered 2 words that sent shockwaves through the room. "Daddy. Bruises." The nurse's face paled. She turned to the nearest colleague. "Call the police now." In less than 10 minutes, the hospital was swarming. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Officers rushed in, their radios crackling as they spoke in hushed, urgent tones. One of them, Detective Tom Willis, a gruff man with salt and pepper hair, approached the nurse who had called them. "What do we know?" he asked, his eyes flicking toward the small girl sitting on a chair with a blanket draped over her shoulders. "She came in with a newborn," the nurse explained, her voice shaking. "Said those 2 words, 'Daddy bruises.' I don't know what happened, but I have a feeling it's bad." Tom nodded grimly and approached the girl. She was sitting stiffly, staring at the floor as if it held all the answers to questions she couldn't voice. He crouched down to her level, his voice soft but firm. "Hey, sweetheart. My name's Detective Willis. What's yours?" She didn't respond. Her fingers fidgeted with the frayed edges of her hoodie. Her breathing shallow. He tried again. "We're here to help. Can you tell me your name?" After a long pause, she finally whispered, "Emily." "Okay, Emily. Can you tell me who the baby is?" Her eyes darted up, filled with fear. "He's my brother." Her voice was barely a whisper, but the words hit like a punch to the gut. "And your parents? Are they home right now?" Emily's eyes welled with tears and she shook her head violently. "Please don't make me go back. He'll find me." Tom's jaw tightened. He didn't need to hear more to know exactly what kind of situation he was dealing with. "Emily, we're going to keep you safe. I promise. But I need you to help me a little, okay? Who's hurting you?" Her body trembled as she choked out the words, "Daddy, Todd." Tom felt a knot form in his stomach. Todd Harper. The name was familiar, too familiar. He'd dealt with him before, but never for anything this serious. What did he do to you? "Emily." Tears spilled down her cheeks and she hugged her knees to her chest. He gives me bruises. And if I tell, he'll hurt my brother too." Tom stood and signaled to one of the officers. "Get Child Protective Services on the line. I want them here now." The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Doctors checked Emily for injuries and CPS was on their way. But Tom's focus was on the immediate threat, Todd Harper. He picked up his radio. "I need a unit at 221 Maple Street. We have probable cause for an arrest. Suspect's name is Todd Harper." As the officers mobilized, Tom returned to Emily, who was now sipping a cup of warm tea, her hands still shaking. "Emily, we're going to take care of you and your brother, but I need you to stay here, okay? No one's going to hurt you." She nodded, though her gaze remained distant. 20 minutes later, the crackling voice of an officer came through Tom's radio. "Suspect in custody. We found him trying to leave the house." Tom exhaled, relieved, but he knew this was only the beginning. There was more to Emily's story. He could see it in her eyes, and whatever secrets she was holding, they were buried deep, like scars hidden beneath layers of fear. As he walked back into the hospital, he found Emily sitting by the window, staring out at the flashing police lights. The reflection of the chaos outside danced in her eyes, but her expression remained blank, as if she'd retreated to a place no one could reach. "Emily," he said gently, sitting down beside her. "We've got Todd. He can't hurt you anymore." Her fingers tightened around the cup of tea. "He always finds me," she whispered. Tom's heart ached at the words. This wasn't just fear, it was a certainty she had lived with for too long. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Not this time. I promise you, Emily. Not this time." For the first time since she arrived, Emily's shoulders relaxed, but the fear in her eyes remained. Tom knew that promises weren't enough. Actions would speak louder, and he'd do whatever it took to make sure she never had to live in fear again. The cold fluorescent lights hummed softly in the hospital's quiet hallway as Emily sat alone on the edge of the examination bed, her small legs swinging gently over the side. Her oversized hoodie draped over her like a protective shield, and her fingers fidgeted with the worn cuffs. She could hear the faint murmur of voices outside the room, each word indistinguishable, but the tension in their tones was impossible to miss. Her gaze shifted toward the tiny crib where her baby brother lay, sleeping peacefully under the warm glow of a heat lamp. His tiny chest rose and fell with each breath, and the small whimpering sounds he made tugged at her heart. She had promised herself she would protect him, no matter what, but now everything felt out of her control. The door creaked open and Dr. Grace Meyer stepped in. Her soft-soled shoes made little noise as she approached Emily, carrying a clipboard. Her presence was gentle, calm, the kind that made you feel safe without saying a word. She had kind brown eyes that seemed to see everything without judgment. "Hey, Emily," Grace said, pulling up a chair to sit beside her. "I brought you some apple juice, thought you might be thirsty." Emily hesitated before taking the small juice box, her fingers brushing against Grace's hand. She didn't sip from it right away. Instead, she held it tightly, as if it were an anchor in the storm swirling inside her. Grace watched her carefully, noting the way her shoulders hunched, the way she avoided eye contact. "I know today's been really hard," she said softly, "but you've been so brave." Emily's throat tightened, and she looked down at her lap. Brave wasn't what she felt. If she had been brave, she wouldn't have waited this long to tell someone. Grace leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. "Emily, I'm here to help you. Whatever you tell me stays between us unless you want me to share it. But I can't help if I don't understand what's going on." For a moment, the room felt unbearably silent. Emily's fingers clenched the juice box tighter, causing a small crinkle. "He gets mad," Emily whispered finally, her voice fragile. "All the time." Grace waited, giving her space to continue. "If I leave a toy on the floor or if I forget to clean up, he yells. Sometimes he hits me." Her fingers traced the edge of her hoodie sleeve. "I try to be good, but it's never enough." Grace's heart ached at the weight of those words. She had seen many cases like Emily's over the years, but it never got easier. "Emily, what you're going through, it's not your fault. You know that, right?" Emily shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "He always says it's my fault. And if I tell anyone, he'll hurt my brother." Her gaze flicked to the crib, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "He doesn't like the baby." Grace felt a chill run down her spine. "When was the last time he hurt you, Emily?" Emily hesitated before slowly pulling up the sleeve of her hoodie. Grace's breath caught in her throat, as she saw the dark bruises wrapped around the girl's forearm, finger-shaped marks that told a story of violence. "I tried to take the baby when he was crying," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "But Todd grabbed me and said I was stupid, that I shouldn't touch the baby if I didn't know what I was doing." Grace gently touched Emily's arm, careful not to apply pressure. "Emily, you were trying to protect him. That's not stupid, that's love." Emily wiped her tears with the sleeve of her hoodie. "I didn't know what to do, so I ran. I waited until he was asleep and took the baby, but I was scared he'd wake up and find us." The door opened slightly, and Detective Tom Willis peeked inside. Grace met his gaze, and with a subtle nod, she signaled him to come in. Emily stiffened, her fingers tightening around the juice box. "Hey, Emily," Tom said, his voice warm but steady. He crouched down to her level, giving her space but making sure she knew he was there. "I just wanted to check on you." Emily's eyes flicked toward Grace, searching for reassurance. "You can trust him," Grace said softly. "He's here to help, just like me." Tom offered a gentle smile. "I know you've been through a lot, but I have good news. We've taken Todd into custody. He can't hurt you right now." Emily's breath hitched, and for a moment Tom thought she might start crying again. But instead she shook her head. "He'll get out. He always does." Tom's jaw tightened. He had heard those words before, too many times. Abusers like Todd thrived on the fear they created, making their victims believe escape was impossible. But he wasn't going to let that happen to Emily. "Not this time," Tom said firmly. "We have enough to keep him locked up, but I need your help, Emily. The more you tell us, the better chance we have of making sure he doesn't hurt you or anyone else again." Emily's fingers trembled as she took a small sip of the apple juice. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe she could be safe. But the years of living under Todd's control had left her with a fear that ran deeper than words. Tom glanced at Grace, who gave him a small nod. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notepad. "Let's start with something simple. Can you tell me about your mom? Is she home often?" Emily bit her lip. "She works a lot. Todd says she's too tired to deal with us when she gets home." "Does she know what's been happening?" Emily hesitated, then shook her head. "Sometimes she sees the bruises, but Todd tells her I'm clumsy, and she believes him." Her voice cracked. "Or she pretends to." Tom's heart sank. He had seen it before. Parents who ignored the signs out of denial or fear of facing the truth. But Emily didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of their failures. Grace gently placed her hand over Emily's. "What you did tonight was incredibly brave, Emily. You saved your brother and you're protecting yourself. That's what matters." Emily sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "What's going to happen to him? To the baby?" Tom leaned forward. "We're going to make sure he's safe, just like we're making sure you're safe. There are people who care about you, Emily. You're not alone in this." For the first time since she arrived, Emily allowed herself to lean into Grace's comforting presence. But deep down, a small voice still whispered warnings. Warnings she had heard in Todd's angry whispers for years. "Don't trust anyone. They'll never believe you." But maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe that voice could be wrong. The cold morning light streamed through the hospital blinds, casting soft stripes across the pale walls. Emily lay curled up on the cot, her small frame hidden beneath the blanket. The sterile smell of disinfectant and faint beeping from nearby monitors filled the air. She wasn't asleep, though. Her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling as her mind raced. She could still hear Todd's voice in her head, sharp, threatening, cutting into her like a knife. "You think you're smart? You think they'll believe you?" Her breath hitched as she pulled the blanket tighter around her. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts, and the door creaked open. Nurse Carla, a kind woman in her 50s with soft salt and pepper curls, entered the room carrying a tray of breakfast. "Good morning, sweetheart," Carla said warmly, setting the tray on the table beside Emily's bed. "I brought you pancakes and scrambled eggs. Figured you'd need some fuel after such a rough night." Emily didn't move. Her stomach growled softly, but she wasn't sure she could eat. Her gaze flicked to the crib on the other side of the room, where her baby brother slept peacefully, swaddled in a clean blanket. For a moment, the sight of him calmed her. He looked safe, as if the nightmare they'd just escaped was nothing but a bad dream. "You know," Carla continued as she sat down beside the bed, "when my kids were little, they used to say pancakes could fix anything. Bad test at school? Pancakes. Scraped knee? Pancakes. Even heartbreak? Always pancakes." She smiled, waiting to see if her little story would draw a reaction. Emily remained silent, but the corner of her mouth twitched, almost as if she wanted to smile but had forgotten how. "It's okay," Carla said, her tone gentle. "You don't have to eat if you're not ready." She brushed a strand of hair away from Emily's face. "But you've been so strong, you deserve to take care of yourself." 2. Emily's fingers finally twitched, reaching for the fork. She stabbed a small piece of pancake and lifted it to her mouth. It tasted warm, buttery, and sweet, and for the first time in what felt like days, she let herself enjoy something simple. The door opened again and Detective Tom Willis stepped inside, holding a manila folder under his arm. He smiled softly at Carla and gestured for her to give them a moment alone. Carla nodded, patting Emily's hand before leaving. Tom pulled up a chair next to Emily's bed and set the folder on his lap. "Good to see you eating," he said, leaning back slightly. "You've been through a lot. I know it's hard, but you're doing great, Emily." She didn't respond, but she didn't shrink away from him either. That was progress. "I wanted to check on you," Tom continued. "We have Todd in custody, and the judge denied his bail this morning." Emily's head snapped up, her wide eyes meeting his. "He's staying in jail?" "That's right." Tom's voice was firm, reassuring. "He can't come near you or your brother." Emily exhaled, a shaky breath escaping her lips. But even with the news, the tension in her shoulders didn't completely disappear. "What about my mom?" she whispered. "Did she come?" Tom hesitated. He hated this part. "She's still at home right now." He could see the flicker of disappointment in her eyes, the way her lips pressed into a thin line. "We're talking to her, Emily, but you need to know that no matter what happens, we're going to take care of you. You're not going back to that house." Her eyes welled with tears, but she wiped them away quickly, as if she didn't want him to see her cry. "She didn't believe me before," Emily said softly. "She always believed him." Tom leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "That's not your fault. None of this is your fault. Parents are supposed to protect their kids, and when they don't, that's on them, not you." Emily's fingers tightened around the edge of the blanket. "He said if I told anyone, he'd hurt the baby." Her voice trembled. "That's why I didn't say anything sooner. I didn't know what to do." Tom's jaw tightened, anger simmering just beneath his calm exterior. He had seen too many kids like Emily, scared, broken, blaming themselves for things they couldn't control. "You did the right thing," he said firmly. "You saved him. You saved both of you." Emily sniffled, her breath hitching as she tried to hold back another wave of tears. "What happens now?" "Well," Tom said, opening the folder on his lap, "we're going to make sure Todd stays in jail. But I need your help, Emily. The more you can tell us about what happened, the stronger the case will be." Her fingers trembled, and she looked down at her lap. "I can't remember everything." "That's okay," Tom reassured her. "We'll take it slow. Just start wherever you feel comfortable." Emily hesitated for a long moment before finally speaking. "It started when I was little. At first he'd just yell, then he'd break things. But when I turned 9, he started hitting me." Her voice wavered, but she kept going. "If I made noise when the baby was sleeping. If I got a bad grade at school, he'd grab me and shake me. He said I was stupid, that I made his life harder." Tom's heart broke at her words, but he kept his face calm, giving her the space to continue. "The worst was last night," she whispered, her fingers clutching the blanket like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "The baby wouldn't stop crying. I tried to calm him down, but Todd came in and..." She trailed off, unable to finish. Tom reached out and gently touched her hand. You don't have to say it all right now. I'm proud of you for telling me this much. Emily wiped her eyes with her sleeve, her breath still shaky. I thought he was going to hurt him, so I waited until he fell asleep and I ran. Tom nodded, his voice gentle. You did the right thing, Emily. You protected your brother and you got help. No matter what Todd said, you're not weak, you're brave. The door opened and Carla peeked in. Sorry to interrupt, but Child Protective Services is here to talk to Emily. Tom stood, giving Emily a reassuring nod. I'll be right here if you need me. As he left the room, he couldn't shake the image of her sitting there, so small and fragile, but carrying the weight of a world that had treated her unfairly. He knew this was just the beginning, and the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But if there was one thing he was sure of, it was this. Emily had already taken the hardest step, and he wasn't going to let her down. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly in the hospital hallway as Detective Tom Willis leaned against the wall, tapping his fingers on the manila folder tucked under his arm. He watched through the small glass window of the room where Emily sat, clutching her baby brother's tiny hand as he stirred lightly in the crib. There was something fragile about the way she touched him. Gentle, protective, as if the weight of the world rested on her small shoulders. The sound of heels clicking against the tile floor drew Tom's attention. Joanne Harper, Emily's mother, approached, her thin frame wrapped in a beige coat. Her hair was hastily tied back and dark circles shadowed her eyes. She looked worn, defeated even. But there was something else behind her expression. Defensiveness. Detective Willis, she said, folding her arms as she stopped in front of him. Where's my daughter? Tom straightened. She's inside with her brother. I want to see her, Joanne demanded, her tone sharper now. She's been gone all night. I need to know she's okay. Tom studied her carefully, noting the tension in her posture and the way her gaze flicked nervously toward the room. She's physically okay, but emotionally, that's a different story. His voice softened. She's been through a lot, Mrs. Harper. Joanne's lips tightened and she looked away. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know things were this bad. Tom took a step closer, lowering his voice so that only she could hear. Didn't know or didn't want to know. Her head snapped back toward him, eyes narrowing. Are you accusing me of something? I'm asking you, Tom said calmly, how you could miss the bruises on your own daughter. Joanne's breath hitched, and for a moment, her tough exterior cracked. She wiped a tear from the corner of her eye, but quickly straightened her posture. Todd said she was clumsy, that she fell off her bike or tripped running up the stairs. Her voice faltered. I wanted to believe him. But you didn't, Tom replied gently. Not really. Otherwise you wouldn't be here, would you? Joanne hesitated, her gaze locked on the door. Can I see her now? Tom didn't answer right away. He knew Joanne's presence could either help Emily or set her back. Before you go in, I need you to understand something. Emily doesn't trust easily right now. If she feels like you're taking Todd's side, it could crush her. I'm her mother, Joanne said defensively. Then prove it, Tom said firmly. She needs you to believe her. Inside the room, Emily sat cross-legged on the chair next to the crib, her fingers tracing patterns on the blanket covering her baby brother. When the door opened, her body tensed. She recognized the familiar shuffle of her mother's footsteps and immediately pulled her knees to her chest, as if she could make herself smaller. Emily, Joanne said softly, stepping into the room. Her voice cracked slightly, but she quickly recovered. I've been so worried about you. Emily didn't look up. Her eyes remained fixed on the crib. Why are you here? Joanne hesitated, closing the door behind her. I came to make sure you're okay. She took a step closer, but the distance between them felt like a chasm neither knew how to cross. The detective told me what you said about Todd. At the mention of his name, Emily flinched, her arms wrapping tighter around her legs. I told you before, she whispered, her voice shaking. I told you and you didn't believe me. Joanne's heart shattered at the accusation. I didn't want to believe it, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought if I ignored it, it would stop. I thought if I kept him happy, things would get better. Emily's head snapped up. Her eyes filled with tears and anger. You let him hurt me. Joanne stumbled back a step as if the words had physically struck her. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't try to wipe them away. I'm sorry, she choked out. I was scared. I didn't know how to leave. Emily's voice rose, the emotions she had buried for years finally spilling out. You weren't supposed to leave. You were supposed to protect me. You should have stopped him. Joanne covered her mouth, sobbing quietly as she leaned against the wall. I know, she whispered. I know, and I'm so sorry. I should have done more. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the soft coos of the baby in the crib. Emily wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her hoodie, her breathing ragged. It's too late, she said finally. You can't fix it now. Joanne's knees buckled, and she sank into the chair across from Emily. I know I can't change what happened, but I can be here now. Please, Emily, let me help you. Emily stared at her, her expression a mixture of pain and longing. She wanted to believe her mother, wanted to believe things could be different. But the wounds Todd had left, both physical and emotional, ran too deep. I don't know how to trust you, Emily admitted, her voice barely audible. Joanne reached out, but her hand hovered in the air, unsure if it was welcome. Then let me earn it back, she said, her voice steady despite the tears. I'll do whatever it takes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then slowly, Emily lowered her legs from her chest and looked directly at her mother. Promise me you'll never let him come near us again. Joanne's breath hitched, but she nodded. I promise. There was a knock at the door and Detective Tom stepped in, his expression neutral but watchful. Emily, he said gently, we're going to need you to answer a few more questions soon. But it's your choice if you want to do it today or wait until you're ready. Emily glanced at her mother, then back at Tom. The weight of her past pressed down on her, but there was something about the way Tom spoke, like he wasn't rushing her or expecting too much. She nodded slowly. I'll answer them today. Tom smiled softly. You're a brave kid, Emily. Take your time, and when you're ready, we'll be here. As he closed the door, Emily turned back to her mother. If you really mean it, she said quietly, then you'll be there when I tell them everything. Joanne's eyes filled with determination. I will be. For the first time in years, Emily felt the faintest flicker of hope. It was fragile, like the first light of dawn after a long, dark night. But it was there. And for now, that was enough. The quiet hum of the fluorescent lights echoed softly in the sterile hospital room, mixing with the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. Emily sat cross-legged on the bed, hugging her knees as she stared at the floor. Her baby brother lay asleep in the crib, his tiny hands curled into fists. The air felt heavy, like the weight of everything she hadn't said was pressing down on her. Outside, Detective Tom Willis leaned against the wall, glancing at his wristwatch. It had been over an hour since they asked Emily if she wanted to start answering questions. They weren't pushing her. She had been through enough already. But time was of the essence. If they could get more details from her, it would help the case against Todd Harper. The door to the waiting area opened, and Nurse Carla stepped in, holding a cup of tea. She's scared, Carla said gently, handing the cup to Tom. I don't blame her. It's hard to speak when you've been silenced for so long. Tom nodded, taking a small sip of the tea. I know, but she's stronger than she realizes. Inside the room, Emily pressed her forehead against her knees, closing her eyes. The sound of footsteps made her look up, and she saw Dr. Grace Meyer standing by the crib, adjusting the blanket over the baby. The doctor's movements were soft and deliberate, as though she were protecting something fragile. Grace turned and smiled at Emily. Your brother's doing really well, she said. He's strong, just like you. Emily bit her bottom lip. She wanted to believe that, but the fear inside her was louder than Grace's words. He's safe here, right? She asked quietly. Absolutely, Grace said. No one can hurt him. She pulled up a chair and sat next to Emily's bed. "What about you? Are you feeling a little safer now?" Emily shrugged. "I don't know. Every time I think I am, I remember what he said, that he'll always find me." Grace reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair away from Emily's face. "He said those things to scare you. That's how people like him work. But you're not alone anymore, Emily. You have people who believe you now." Emily swallowed hard. "What if it's not enough?" Grace didn't answer right away. Instead, she took Emily's hand and held it. "We'll make sure it is, but it starts with you trusting us to help." There was another knock on the door, and Tom entered, his expression warm but serious. He crouched down so he was eye level with Emily. "You doing okay?" Emily nodded, but her fingers fidgeted nervously with the hem of her hoodie. "I know this is hard," Tom said gently, "but you've already been so brave. What you tell us today will help us protect you and your brother." He set his notepad on the small table beside the bed. "We can go as slow as you want. And if you need to stop at any point, just tell me, okay?" Emily hesitated, then slowly nodded. "Okay." Tom opened the notepad, clicking his pen. "Let's start with last night. Can you tell me what happened after you put your brother to bed?" Emily's breath hitched and she tightened her grip on her knees. "He was crying a lot," she said softly. "Todd hates when he cries." Tom's pen hovered over the page, but he didn't write anything yet. "What did Todd do when he heard the baby crying?" Emily's eyes darted toward the crib, as if she were afraid her brother would wake up and relive the nightmare with her. "He yelled at me to make him stop. I tried, but the baby wouldn't calm down. Then Todd came in." Her voice cracked. "He grabbed me by the arm and pulled me out of the room. He said I was useless." Grace reached over and gently squeezed Emily's hand, grounding her. "He threw me against the wall," Emily continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then he went back into the room. I thought he was going to hurt the baby." Tom's hand tightened around his pen, but he kept his voice calm. "What did you do next?" "I waited until he fell asleep," Emily said. "Then I took the baby and ran. I didn't know where to go. So I just kept running until I saw the hospital." Her tears spilled over and she wiped them away quickly. "I didn't mean to tell anyone. I was scared they wouldn't believe me." Tom set the notepad down and leaned forward. "Emily, you saved your brother's life, and we do believe you, but I need to ask you one more question. Has Todd ever hurt the baby before?" Emily hesitated, her breath hitching. "He's thrown things at him when he's crying," she whispered. "Once, he threw a shoe and it hit the crib. The baby didn't get hurt, but I knew it was only a matter of time." Tom exchanged a glance with Grace, and they both understood the gravity of what Emily had just revealed. This wasn't just a case of physical abuse, it was escalating. And if Emily hadn't acted, the baby could have been seriously hurt or worse. Grace pulled Emily into a gentle hug, letting the girl sob quietly into her shoulder. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore," she whispered. "We're going to protect you." Later that afternoon, Tom met with the CPS caseworker, Elaine Porter, in the hospital's conference room. Elaine was a no-nonsense woman in her mid-40s with a reputation for being both compassionate and fiercely protective of the kids in her care. "Based on Emily's statements and the evidence we've gathered, we have more than enough to keep Todd behind bars," Tom said, sliding the notepad across the table. "But I'm worried about her mother." Elaine frowned as she flipped through the notes. "Joanne's cooperation, or lack of it, could complicate things. If she defends Todd, it could hurt our case in court." "I know," Tom said, rubbing the back of his neck. "But I think Joanne's starting to realize the damage that's been done. The question is whether she's willing to act on it." Elaine tapped her pen against the notepad. "Emily needs stability. If Joanne can't provide that, we'll need to consider placing Emily and the baby in a temporary foster home." Tom sighed. "I was hoping we wouldn't have to go that route." Elaine leaned forward, her expression softening. "We'll do what's best for Emily, but right now she needs to feel safe, and that means keeping her away from Todd for good." Back in the hospital room, Emily sat by the window, watching the cars pass by on the street below. Her fingers traced circles on the glass as she thought about the life she had left behind. The thought of never returning to that house should have been comforting, but all she felt was fear. Grace entered quietly, carrying a small stuffed bear with a red bow around its neck. "I thought you might like this," she said, placing the bear in Emily's lap. Emily held the bear against her chest, the soft fabric absorbing her tears. "Is he really gone?" she whispered. "Will I ever be safe again?" Grace knelt beside her. "Yes, Emily, you will. But healing takes time, and you don't have to do it alone." For the first time, Emily allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had made it out. But the fear still lingered, like a shadow she couldn't shake, and she wasn't sure if she ever would. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the hospital parking lot as Emily sat quietly on the bench in the small outdoor garden. A light breeze rustled the leaves of the nearby trees, and the distant sound of traffic hummed faintly in the background. But Emily barely noticed. Her hands were folded in her lap, fingers nervously picking at a loose thread on her hoodie. The small stuffed bear Grace had given her sat beside her, its red bow fluttering slightly in the wind. She had told them everything, or at least almost everything. The heavy burden she had carried for years had finally begun to lift. But it wasn't gone. It was still there, pressing against her chest, making it hard to breathe. From the doorway of the garden, Detective Tom Willis watched her for a moment before approaching. He didn't want to rush her, but there was something he needed to share. Something that might make things even more complicated. "Mind if I sit with you for a bit?" he asked as he reached her side. Emily shrugged, her eyes still focused on the thread she was pulling. "I guess." Tom sat down, stretching his legs out in front of him. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the rustling of the trees. "We found some things at your house," Tom said softly. Careful not to overwhelm her. "In the basement." Emily's fingers stilled. Her heart thumped in her chest as she imagined what they might have seen. The basement was where Todd had hidden most of his anger, where he'd thrown things, yelled, and made threats that haunted her long after she escaped. Tom continued, keeping his tone gentle. "We found drawings on the walls, yours I think. Pictures of flowers, eyes, and hands reaching out." Emily's breath hitched. She had drawn those pictures late at night when she was locked in the basement, trying to make sense of her fear through images when words failed her. "You weren't supposed to see those," she whispered, pulling her knees to her chest. "They were my secrets." "I know," Tom said, "and I'm sorry we had to look. But those pictures, they help us understand what you've been through. They're important, Emily." She buried her face in her arms, her small body trembling. "The basement was the worst," she mumbled. "He'd lock me down there for hours if I made him mad. Sometimes all night." Tom's hands tightened into fists at his sides, but he forced himself to stay calm. "You don't have to go back there, Emily. Ever. We're going to make sure of that." Emily peeked up at him, her eyes red and swollen. "You promise?" "I promise," Tom said, his voice steady. "But we need to make sure Todd stays behind bars. To do that, we need your help. The drawings, the bruises, they're part of the story. But if there's anything else, anything you haven't told us, now's the time to share it." Emily hesitated, her fingers gripping the edge of her hoodie. There was one more thing she hadn't told them. One secret she had kept hidden, even from herself, because admitting it out loud made it real. Her heart pounded as she tried to find the courage to speak. She started, but the words caught in her throat. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she shook her head violently. "I can't. It's too bad I can't say it." Tom leaned forward, his voice soft but firm. "Whatever it is, you don't have to be afraid anymore. You've already been so brave. This is just one more step." Emily squeezed her eyes shut, taking deep, shaky breaths. Finally, she whispered, "One night he came into my room. I thought he just wanted to yell at me, but he sat on my bed. He said if I told anyone, he'd hurt the baby." Her voice broke, and she sobbed into her arms. "He touched me. I didn't know what to do. I just laid there and pretended I wasn't there." Tom felt his chest tighten as the full weight of her words sank in. He had suspected it, But hearing her say it was something else entirely. His instincts screamed for him to find Todd and make him pay, but right now, Emily needed him to be calm. Grace appeared at the doorway, having overheard the last part of Emily's confession. She walked over quietly and knelt beside the girl, wrapping her arms around her. "You did the right thing by telling us," Grace whispered. "It wasn't your fault. None of it was your fault." Emily clung to her, sobbing uncontrollably. The dam had broken and years of pain poured out in waves. Tom stood, giving them space as he paced a few steps away. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call to Elaine Porter, the CPS caseworker. "We have confirmation of sexual abuse," he said quietly. "She just admitted it. We need to get her a forensic interview and start trauma counseling immediately." Elaine's voice was calm but determined. "I'll set it up. And Tom, we'll make sure she never has to see him again." A few hours later, Emily was back in her hospital room, curled up under the blanket with her stuffed bear tucked against her chest. The baby was asleep in the crib, his soft breathing the only sound in the room. Joanne Harper entered quietly, her eyes swollen from crying. She approached the bed cautiously, unsure if her presence would comfort or upset her daughter. "Emily?" Emily shifted under the blanket but didn't look up. Joanne sat down in the chair beside the bed, her fingers nervously twisting the strap of her purse. I heard what you told the detective," she said softly. "I had no idea it was that bad. If I had known..." Her voice broke and she covered her mouth as sobs overtook her. "I'm so sorry." Emily finally turned to face her, her expression blank. "You didn't want to know," she said, her voice flat. "You ignored it." Joanne wiped her tears and nodded. "You're right. I did, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But I'm here now. I want to help you heal. I don't know if you can ever forgive me, but I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." Emily stared at her for a long moment, the silence between them heavy with years of hurt. "You can't fix it," she said finally. "But maybe you can help me feel normal again." Joanne's breath caught and she nodded. "I'll do my best." As the room fell quiet, Emily pulled the bear closer to her chest and closed her eyes. For the first time, she let herself imagine a life where Todd couldn't hurt her, where she didn't have to be afraid. The road to healing would be long, and the scars would never fully disappear. But for the first time in years, she had taken the first step. The soft patter of rain tapped against the hospital window, creating a steady rhythm that matched the faint beeping of the monitors inside Emily's room. She sat cross-legged on the bed, staring out at the gray skies. Droplets rolled down the glass like tears, blurring the view of the world beyond. She wished she could blur her memories that easily, wipe them clean, make them disappear. Her baby brother stirred in the crib beside her, letting out a small whimper before settling back into sleep. Emily reached out and gently adjusted the blanket around him, her fingers lingering on his tiny chest. His warmth reminded her of why she had run, why she had endured so much. For him. The door opened softly, and Elaine Porter, the CPS caseworker, entered the room. Elaine wore a navy blazer over a crisp white blouse. Her professional appearance softened by the warmth in her eyes. She carried a folder tucked under one arm, and a small teddy bear in the other. "Hi, Emily," Elaine said as she approached. "How are you feeling today?" Emily shrugged, her gaze shifting to the floor. "I don't know." Elaine set the teddy bear on the bed next to her. "I brought you this. I figured every kid could use an extra bear." Emily managed a small smile and picked up the bear, hugging it to her chest. "Thanks." Elaine pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down, her posture relaxed but attentive. "I know talking about everything yesterday was really hard," she said gently. "But you were incredibly brave. What you did, it's going to help make sure you and your brother stay safe." Emily's fingers traced the stitching on the bear's paw. "Is he going to jail forever?" "We're going to do everything we can to make sure he's held accountable," Elaine said. "But I need to be honest with you. There's a chance you'll have to testify in court." Emily's body tensed and she shook her head violently. "No, I can't do that. I can't be in the same room as him." Elaine reached for her hand, holding it gently. "I know it sounds scary, But you won't be alone. We'll make sure you have support. People who care about you will be right there with you. And there are ways we can protect you, like testifying from a separate room using a video feed. But Emily, your testimony is important. It could be the final piece we need to keep him locked up. Tears welled in Emily's eyes, and she wiped them away quickly. He'll stare at me. He'll make me remember everything. Elaine nodded, understanding the depth of Emily's fear. That's why we'll take it one step at a time. You don't have to decide right now, but just know that you're stronger than you think. Emily hugged the bear tighter, her mind spinning. How could she face Todd again after everything he had done? But deep down, she knew that if she didn't, he might find a way to come back. And she couldn't let that happen, not to her and not to her brother. Later that afternoon, Emily sat in the small playroom the hospital had set up for young patients. Brightly colored walls were decorated with animal murals, and shelves were lined with puzzles, stuffed animals, and board games. She sat at a small table, absent-mindedly coloring in a picture of a sunflower. Joanne Harper walked in, hesitant, her hands gripping her purse strap tightly. She looked around, her gaze landing on Emily, who didn't look up. Joanne's heart ached at the distance between them, distance she knew she had created. But she was determined to bridge it no matter how long it took. "Hi, honey," Joanne said, her voice soft as she sat down across from Emily. Emily continued coloring, her strokes slow and deliberate. "What do you want?" Joanne swallowed the lump in her throat. "I wanted to see you. I wanted to check in and make sure you're okay." Emily set the crayon down and finally looked up. Her eyes filled with hurt. "Why now? Why do you care now?" Joanne's fingers trembled as she reached across the table, but Emily pulled her hand away. "I should have cared more before," Joanne admitted, tears pooling in her eyes. "I should have believed you the first time you told me. I was scared." "Emily, I was scared of what would happen if I left him." "You were scared?" Emily's voice cracked, anger rising in her chest. "I was the one getting hurt. I was the one hiding in the basement while you acted like everything was fine." Joanne's tears fell freely now, and she didn't try to stop them. "I know," she whispered, "and you have every right to be angry, but I'm here now. I want to make things right if you'll let me." Emily's jaw tightened as she fought back her own tears. "You can't make it right." Joanne nodded, accepting the truth in her daughter's words. "You're right, I can't change what happened. But I can be here for you now. I can make sure you and your brother never have to see him again. I promise you, Emily, I'll protect you this time." The room fell silent except for the sound of crayons rolling across the table. Emily's gaze dropped to the picture in front of her. The sunflower she had been coloring was bright yellow, its petals extending outward as if reaching for something just beyond its grasp. "You can't leave me again," Emily said, her voice barely audible. "Not this time." Joanne reached across the table again, and this time Emily didn't pull away. Their hands met, fingers intertwining as the tears they had both been holding back finally fell. "I won't," Joanne promised. "I'm staying." That evening, Detective Tom Willis sat in the conference room with Elaine, reviewing the latest developments in the case. The walls were covered in photos of the evidence collected from the Harper home, images of bruises, drawings from the basement, and the stuffed bear Emily had clung to during her confession. "We've got enough to press charges for physical and sexual abuse," Tom said, tapping a photo of the bruises on Emily's arm. "But her testimony could seal the deal." Elaine nodded, her expression serious. "She's scared, but I think she's starting to understand how important her role is. If we can get her through this, could be the turning point." Tom leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple. "Todd's lawyer is going to fight dirty. He'll claim the bruises were from accidents, that Emily's confused or lying. We need everything airtight." "We'll be ready," Elaine said confidently. "And Emily isn't alone anymore. That's what's going to make the difference." Tom exhaled slowly, the weight of the case pressing down on him. But as he thought of Emily's courage, he felt a renewed sense of determination. They had come too far to let Todd slip through the cracks. Back in her room, Emily lay curled up in bed, the stuffed bear tucked under her arm. The rain had stopped, and the moonlight filtered through the blinds, casting soft shadows on the walls. For the first time in a long while, the shadows didn't scare her. She closed her eyes, letting the quiet settle around her. There was still fear, still doubt, but somewhere beneath it all there was also hope. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to keep going. The next morning, the soft glow of the sun filtered through the blinds of Emily's hospital room, casting a golden hue over the small space. Her baby brother stirred in his crib, yawning as he stretched his tiny arms. Emily sat nearby, watching him with a faint smile. His soft coos filled the room, a soothing reminder that he was safe, for now. But the moment of peace didn't last long. A sharp knock at the door startled her, making her heart race. She clutched the stuffed bear tighter to her chest, her eyes darting toward the door. "It's just me," Nurse Carla said, stepping in with her usual warm smile and a tray of breakfast. "No need to worry, sweetheart." Emily exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing. "Thanks." Carla placed the tray on the small table beside Emily's bed. "Pancakes again," she said with a wink. "They're becoming your signature breakfast." Emily managed a small laugh and picked up her fork. As she ate, Carla sat down across from her, watching the girl carefully. There was something different about Emily today, something quieter, heavier. "You've been doing really well," Carla said gently. "I know it's hard, but everyone's proud of you." Emily didn't respond right away. She poked at her pancake, her thoughts far away. "Do you think he'll get out?" she asked suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. Carla's smile faded and she leaned forward. "We're doing everything we can to make sure he doesn't. But even if he does, we won't let him near you or your brother." Emily's eyes filled with tears. But what if it's not enough? Her voice trembled, the fear she had tried to suppress finally bubbling to the surface. "He always finds a way." Carla reached across the table, placing a comforting hand over Emily's. "He won't this time. You're not alone anymore, Emily. You have people fighting for you now. Detective Willis, Elaine, your mom, we're all here." Emily sniffled, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "I just want him gone." Carla nodded, understanding the weight of those words. "I know you do, and we're going to make sure that happens." Later that day, Detective Tom Willis and Elaine Porter met in the hospital conference room to discuss the next steps in the case. The table was covered in files, photos, and reports detailing the evidence they had gathered. But despite the progress they'd made, they both knew the case was far from over. "We have enough to charge him with multiple counts of abuse," Tom said, flipping through a stack of papers. "But Todd's lawyer is already pushing back. He's claiming Emily made it all up because she didn't like him." Elaine scoffed, shaking her head. "Typical defense tactic. Blame the victim." Tom leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple. "They're also going to argue that the bruises were from accidents, and that Joanne was a neglectful mother who didn't supervise her kids properly." Elaine frowned. "They're trying to shift the blame away from Todd." "Exactly," Tom said. "And if the jury buys it, we could lose this case." Elaine tapped her fingers on the table, thinking, "What about the drawings in the basement? Those pictures tell a story, one that matches Emily's testimony." Tom nodded. "We'll use them. But we'll need more than that to shut down Todd's defense." Elaine leaned forward, lowering her voice. "What about the baby? Has the hospital found any signs of injury?" Tom glanced at the file in front of him. "No physical injuries, but the doctors are running tests to be sure. If they find anything, it could strengthen our case." Elaine sighed, her shoulders tense. "We can't let him get away with this, Tom. Emily's been through too much." "We won't," Tom said firmly. "But we need to prepare for the worst. If Todd's defense team manages to poke holes in our case, we'll have to rely on Emily's testimony. That's why we need to make sure she's ready." In her hospital room, Emily sat on the floor with a notebook open in front of her. She wasn't writing, just staring at the blank page, as if the words she wanted to say were trapped somewhere inside her. The door opened and Joanne stepped in, carrying a small bag. "Hi, sweetheart," she said softly, closing the door behind her. "I brought you some clean clothes." Emily looked up, her expression guarded. "Thanks." Joanne sat down on the bed, watching her daughter carefully. "I talked to the detective today," she said. "They told me you might have to testify in court." Emily's fingers gripped the edge of the notebook. "I don't want to." Joanne's heart ached at the fear in her daughter's voice. "I know, honey, but if you do, I'll be there with you, every step of the way." Emily shook her head. "He'll look at me. He'll make me feel small again." Joanne reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair behind Emily's ear. "You're not small, Emily. You're stronger than you think, and you don't have to do this alone." Emily's lips quivered and tears spilled down her cheeks. "What if I mess up? What if they don't believe me?" Joanne pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly. "They will believe you, and even if you get scared or forget what to say, we'll still be here, no matter what." Emily sobbed into her mother's shoulder, years of pain and fear pouring out all at once. For so long she had felt abandoned, like she had to face everything on her own. But now, for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to. That evening, as the sun set over the city, Emily sat by the window, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. Her baby brother lay asleep in the crib, his soft breathing a comforting sound. Joanne sat beside her, holding her hand. "Mom," Emily said softly. "Yes, sweetheart. Do you think he'll ever be gone for good?" Joanne squeezed her hand gently. "One day, yes, and until that day comes, we'll keep fighting, together." Emily nodded, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. The shadows of her past still loomed, but with each passing day they felt a little less overwhelming. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope that the future could be different. The following morning, the hospital buzzed with its usual hum of activity. Nurses pushing carts down the hallways, doctors reviewing patient charts, and visitors quietly chatting in waiting rooms. But inside Emily's room, the world felt much smaller, as though the walls were closing in on her. She lay on her side, curled under the blanket, listening to the steady rhythm of her baby brother's breathing from the crib. Her eyes burned from crying the night before, and though the sun was shining through the window, the light felt too bright, too intrusive. She pulled the blanket over her head, hoping to stay hidden just a little longer. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Without waiting for permission, Detective Tom Willis entered, followed by Elaine Porter. Tom carried his familiar manila folder, and Elaine had her notebook tucked under her arm. "Good morning, Emily," Tom said softly. He pulled up a chair near the bed and sat down. His posture relaxed but attentive. "How are you feeling today?" Emily didn't answer. She stayed under the blanket, hoping they'd leave if she stayed quiet long enough. Elaine stepped forward, her tone gentle. "We don't have to talk about anything serious if you're not ready," she said. "But we wanted to check in and let you know what's happening with the case." Emily peeked out from under the blanket, her eyes swollen and tired. "What's happening?" she asked quietly. Tom opened the manila folder and pulled out a sheet of paper. "We've officially charged Todd with multiple counts of physical and sexual abuse, child endangerment, and neglect," he explained. "Right now, he's in jail awaiting his court date." Emily's heart pounded at the mention of Todd's name. "Is he mad?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Does he know I told you everything?" Tom leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "He knows. But that doesn't matter, Emily. He can't get to you. You're safe here, and we're making sure he stays behind bars." Elaine sat down on the edge of the bed. "The next step is preparing for court," she said. "But we'll do it at your pace. You don't have to rush into anything." Emily nodded, but her gaze drifted toward the window. She could see a small bird perched on the windowsill, its tiny body shaking as it fluffed its feathers against the breeze. She envied its freedom, the way it could fly away whenever it wanted. "What if he doesn't stay in jail?" Emily asked, her voice barely audible. Tom sighed, his expression softening. "That's why your testimony is so important. The more we can prove, the harder it'll be for him to get out." Emily's hands trembled as she clutched the blanket. "I don't want to see him." You don't have to be in the same room as him, Elaine reassured her. There are options. You can testify from another room using a video link, and we'll make sure you're surrounded by people who support you. Emily swallowed hard, her throat dry. What if I freeze? What if I can't do it? Tom smiled gently. You don't have to be perfect, Emily. You just have to be through it. Emily blinked back tears and nodded slowly. She didn't know if she could be as brave as they wanted her to be, but deep down, she knew she had to try, not just for herself, but for her brother. Later that afternoon, Joanne arrived, carrying a small bag of clean clothes for Emily. She looked tired, as if the weight of guilt was physically dragging her down, but she smiled softly when she saw her daughter sitting up in bed. Hi, sweetheart, Joanne said, setting the bag down on the chair. I brought you your favorite sweatshirt. Emily reached for the bag and pulled out the soft, worn sweatshirt she had loved since she was 8. It smelled faintly of home, a mixture of laundry detergent and the faint scent of vanilla from her mom's baking. Thanks, Emily said softly, hugging the sweatshirt to her chest. Joanne sat on the bed, her hands nervously twisting the strap of her purse. I talked to Elaine earlier, she said. She told me about the court process. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through. I know it's going to be hard, but I want you to know I'll be there every step of the way. Emily looked down at the sweatshirt, her fingers tracing the fabric. You didn't believe me before, she said quietly. Why should I believe you now? Joanne's breath hitched and tears welled in her eyes. Because I'm different now, she whispered. I can't take back what I did, or didn't do. But I'm trying to make things right. I want to be the mom you deserve. Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to believe her mom, but trusting her again felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure if she'd fall or be caught. I don't know if I can trust you yet. Joanne nodded, tears streaming down her face. That's okay, she said, her voice steady despite the tears. I'll be here no matter how long it takes. That evening, Elaine returned with a woman named Dr. Sarah Winters, a child psychologist who had been brought in to help Emily prepare for court. Dr. Winters had a calming presence, with warm brown eyes and a soft voice that made Emily feel like she wasn't being judged. We're going to take things one step at a time, Dr. Winters explained, sitting across from Emily in the small counseling room. Today, we're just going to practice talking about what makes you feel safe. We don't have to talk about Todd unless you want to. Emily nodded hesitantly, clutching the stuffed bear in her lap. Okay. Dr. Winters smiled and handed her a sheet of paper with pictures of different safe places. Parks, beaches, cozy bedrooms, and treehouses. Can you pick the picture that feels the safest to you? Emily scanned the sheet and pointed to the picture of a small cabin in the woods, with a fire burning in the hearth and a thick blanket draped over the couch. That looks cozy, Dr. Winters said. What makes it feel safe? Emily shrugged. It's far away. No one can find you there. Dr. Winters nodded. That makes sense. Sometimes distance can make us feel safe. But what if I told you that safety can also come from the people around you, not just the place you're in? Emily frowned, her fingers tightening around the bear. People can leave, she whispered. They can let you down. That's true, Dr. Winters said gently. But they can also surprise you. Sometimes the people who've made mistakes can be the ones who fight the hardest to protect you. Emily's eyes filled with tears, and she looked down at the floor. I'm scared. Dr. Winters leaned forward, her voice steady. Being scared doesn't mean you're not brave, it just means you care about what happens next. And that's okay. Emily wiped her tears and nodded. I don't want to feel like this forever. You won't, Dr. Winters promised. It'll take time, but you'll get through this and we'll be right here with you. Every step of the way. As the session ended, Emily felt a small but noticeable shift inside her, like a tiny crack of light breaking through the darkness. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she believed she had a chance at something better. She wasn't there yet, but she was on her way. The hospital cafeteria bustled with the midday crowd, nurses grabbing quick lunches, patients sitting quietly with trays of soup, and doctors discussing cases over coffee. But at a small table near the window, Emily sat alone, stirring her spoon aimlessly in a bowl of chicken noodle soup. She wasn't hungry. The warmth of the broth rising into her face didn't comfort her like it used to. Across the room, Detective Tom Willis spotted her and made his way over, carrying a tray with a sandwich and chips. He sat down across from her, offering her a small smile. "Mind if I join you?" Emily shrugged. "I guess." Tom took a bite of his sandwich, watching her carefully. "Soup not hitting the spot today?" She shook her head, still stirring the same spoonful of broth. "It's fine." He leaned back in his chair. "You've been quiet today." Emily didn't respond. Her gaze remained fixed on the swirling soup, her mind far away. "Want to talk about it?" Tom asked gently. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the spoon. "Do you think the jury will believe me?" Tom set his sandwich down, wiping his hands on a napkin. "I do," he said confidently. "You've been brave enough to tell your story, and that's the most important part. People will see that." Emily's eyes flicked up to meet his, tears glistening. "What if they don't? What if they think I made it up because I wanted Todd gone?" Tom leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "Emily, listen to me. The truth is on your side. We have your drawings, the bruises, the things you've told us, and most importantly, we have you. You've already proven more strength than most adults I know. The jury will see that." Emily sniffled, wiping her nose with her sleeve. "I don't feel strong." "That's the thing about being strong," Tom said softly. "It doesn't always feel that way. But it's there, it's in every step you take, even when you're scared." She nodded slowly, letting his words sink in. For the first time in days, a small flicker of hope sparked inside her, though it was fragile and fleeting. Just then, Joanne Harper entered the cafeteria, spotting them from across the room. She hesitated for a moment before walking over. "Hi, honey," she said, her voice soft and tentative. "I didn't know you'd be down here." Emily shifted uncomfortably, her gaze dropping back to her soup. "I wasn't really hungry." Joanne glanced at Tom, silently asking for permission to stay. He nodded and stood up, gathering his tray. "I'll give you two some time." As he walked away, Joanne sat down across from Emily, her fingers nervously twisting a napkin. "You've been on my mind all morning," Joanne said. "I keep thinking about everything you've had to go through, and I'm so sorry, Emily." Emily stirred her soup again, not looking up. "Saying sorry doesn't fix it." "I know," Joanne whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "But I need you to know that I mean it. I failed you. I let Todd control our lives, and you paid the price for my weakness. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Emily's hand stilled, and for a moment the only sound between them was the distant hum of the cafeteria. "Why did you stay with him?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you leave when you knew he was hurting me?" Joanne wiped her tears with the corner of the napkin. "I wish I had a good answer for that," she admitted. "I was scared. Todd was controlling, and I thought I couldn't make it on my own. He made me feel worthless, like I couldn't survive without him." Her voice cracked and she looked down at her lap. "But I see now that staying with him cost me something much more important. You." Emily felt tears sting her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I needed you to protect me," she said, her voice trembling. "I was just a kid." Joanne reached across the table, hesitating for a moment before gently placing her hand over Emily's. "I know, sweetheart, and I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life. But I'm here now. I'm going to help you heal, no matter how long it takes." Emily stared at their hands, her small fingers dwarfed by her mother's. She wanted to pull away, to protect herself from being let down again. But something inside her whispered that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Later that afternoon, Detective Willis, Elaine Porter, and Dr. Sarah Winters met in the hospital's conference room to finalize their plans for court preparation. The air was thick with tension as they reviewed the latest evidence and discussed the possible strategies Todd's defense team might use. They're going to argue that Emily's drawings were a result of an overactive imagination, Tom said, flipping through a folder. They'll say the bruises were from normal childhood accidents. Elaine frowned. And they'll probably try to discredit her by pointing out Joanne's history of staying in the relationship despite the abuse. Dr. Winters tapped her pen against the table, her expression thoughtful. We need to focus on reinforcing Emily's credibility. She's been consistent in her story, and we have physical evidence to back it up. But we also need to prepare her emotionally. Todd's lawyer will try to intimidate her. Tom nodded. She's scared, but I think she's stronger than she realizes. We just need to help her see that. Elaine leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. If we can get through her testimony without any major breakdowns, we'll have a solid case. Dr. Winters looked at Tom, her gaze steady. When's the pretrial hearing? Next week, he replied. We'll start preparing Emily tomorrow. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting shades of orange and purple across the sky, Emily sat by the window in her hospital room. Her baby brother lay asleep in the crib, his tiny hands twitching as he dreamed. Joanne sat on the bed, quietly watching her daughter. You've come a long way, she said softly. I'm proud of you. Emily hugged the stuffed bear against her chest. I'm scared, Mom. I know, Joanne said, her voice steady. And it's okay to be scared, but you're not alone. We're going to get through this together. Emily turned to face her mother, tears streaming down her cheeks. What if I freeze? What if I can't say what they need me to say? Joanne reached out, gently wiping away her tears. You've already said the hardest part. The rest is just telling the truth. And no matter what happens, I'll be right there with you. Emily nodded, her tears slowing as she let her mother's words wash over her. The fear was still there, but so was something new, hope. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel completely alone. The courtroom was colder than Emily had expected. The air conditioning hummed softly above her, and the polished wooden benches reflected the pale morning light filtering through the tall windows. She sat at the front of the courtroom, her small frame practically swallowed by the oversized blazer Elaine had given her to wear. Her fingers gripped the armrest of her chair, as if letting go would send her tumbling into the pit of her deepest fears. Todd Harper sat across the room, flanked by his lawyer. Emily's gaze flicked to him for a split second, and her stomach churned. He wore a dark suit and had neatly combed hair, as if he were just another man going to work, not the monster she remembered. He didn't look at her, but she felt the weight of his presence like a shadow creeping across the floor toward her. Joanne sat next to Emily, holding her hand tightly. You don't have to look at him, sweetheart, she whispered. Just look at me or the judge. Emily nodded, her throat dry. The bailiff called the courtroom to order, and the judge, an older woman with stern eyes but a kind demeanor, took her seat at the bench. The pretrial hearing was officially underway. Detective Tom Willis was the first to testify, outlining the evidence the police had collected, the bruises, the drawings on the basement walls, and the medical reports. He spoke calmly and confidently, as if there was no doubt in his mind about the case. When he finished, Elaine leaned over and whispered to Emily, You're next. Just take a deep breath, okay? Emily nodded, but her breath hitched as the bailiff called her name. Her legs felt wobbly as she stood and made her way to the witness stand. She could hear the soft murmurs of people in the gallery, but they blurred into white noise as she sat down and faced the judge. You're doing great, Elaine mouthed from her seat, offering an encouraging smile. The judge leaned forward slightly, her tone warm but professional. Emily, do you understand that you're here to tell the truth today? Yes. Ma'am, Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. The judge nodded. Take your time, and if you need a break, just let me know. The prosecutor, a tall woman with a gentle but assertive tone, approached the stand. Good morning, Emily. I know this isn't easy, but you're very brave for being here. Emily's fingers trembled as she gripped the edge of the witness stand. Okay. The prosecutor smiled softly. Let's start with something simple. Can you tell the court who lives in your house? My mom, Emily said quietly. Me, my baby brother, and Todd. And how long has Todd been living with you? Emily hesitated, trying to remember. Since I was 7. The prosecutor nodded. Can you tell the court what kind of relationship you had with Todd? Emily's breath hitched, and for a moment she thought she wouldn't be able to answer. But then she remembered Tom's words. The truth is on your side. He was mean, Emily said, her voice shaking. He yelled a lot, and if I did something wrong, he would hurt me. What kind of things would he do? Emily squeezed her eyes shut for a moment, trying to block out the memories. He'd grab me, push me into walls, hit me. One time he threw me into the basement and locked the door. The prosecutor's expression remained calm, but her eyes softened. Did you ever tell anyone about what was happening? Emily nodded slowly. I told my mom once, but Todd said if I told anyone else, he'd hurt my baby brother, so I stopped telling people. Joanne wiped a tear from her cheek, her guilt weighing heavily on her. Emily didn't look at her. She couldn't. Why did you decide to run away with the baby that night? The prosecutor asked. Emily's lip quivered and she clutched the bear hidden in her lap under the witness stand. The baby wouldn't stop crying, she whispered. I tried to calm him down, but Todd got mad. He yelled at me and grabbed me by the arm. Then he went into the baby's room and I was scared he was going to hurt him. So I waited until he fell asleep, and I ran. The courtroom fell silent, the weight of her words pressing down on everyone present. Emily, the prosecutor said gently, did Todd ever touch you in ways that made you feel uncomfortable? Tears streamed down Emily's cheeks as she nodded. Yes, he came into my room at night sometimes. He said if I told anyone, he'd hurt the baby. The prosecutor stepped back, giving Emily a moment to compose herself. You're doing really well, she said softly. We're almost done. Emily wiped her face with the sleeve of her blazer, sniffling as she tried to steady her breathing. The defense attorney, a slick man with a sharp suit and an even sharper tone, stood and approached the witness stand. His eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at her, as if searching for cracks in her story. Emily, he said, his voice calm but calculated. I know this is difficult, but I need to ask you a few questions. Emily's heart raced, and she gripped the bear tighter. You said Todd hurt you when you misbehaved. Can you give us an example of what you did to make him angry? Emily blinked, confused. I didn't do anything on purpose. Sometimes he got mad if I left a toy on the floor or if the baby cried. The lawyer nodded, pretending to be sympathetic. I see, so if the baby was crying, that could make him angry? Yes, Emily whispered. And you were responsible for taking care of the baby, weren't you? Emily's breath quickened. I tried. The lawyer smiled faintly as if he had caught her in a trap. Do you think Todd was just trying to discipline you when he grabbed you? Maybe he thought you weren't doing a good enough job with the baby. Tears streamed down her face, but she shook her head. No, he hurt me because he liked it. He wasn't trying to help. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. Are you sure you're not just upset because you didn't like him as your stepdad? Before Emily could answer, the judge interjected. Counselor, that's enough. Move on. The defense attorney stepped back, but Emily was already spiraling. Her chest felt tight and her vision blurred with tears. Joanne stood from her seat. Your Honor, may I approach her, please? The judge nodded and Joanne rushed to her daughter's side, wrapping her arms around her. You're okay, she whispered, stroking Emily's hair. You did so well. Emily sobbed into her mother's shoulder, the weight of the courtroom finally crashing down on her. The judge called for a brief recess, and as the courtroom emptied, Tom and Elaine approached the witness stand. You did amazing, Emily, Elaine said, her voice full of pride. Emily looked up, her face streaked with tears. Did I mess up? No, Tom said firmly. You told the truth, and that's what matters. You were incredible. As they guided her out of the courtroom, Emily felt exhausted, as though she had run a marathon. But beneath the fear and the tears, there was something else, a sense of relief. She had spoken her truth, and no matter what happened next, she had taken back a piece of the power Todd had stolen from her. For the first time, She felt like maybe, just maybe, she could breathe again. The courthouse steps felt like a mountain beneath Emily's feet as she descended them slowly. Joanne's arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. The warm afternoon sun hit her face, but it did little to ease the chill that had settled deep inside her after the testimony. The streets buzzed with the usual noise of traffic, pedestrians, and city life, but everything sounded distant, like she was underwater. Joanne leaned down, her voice soft and soothing. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Emily nodded, but her body betrayed her with a visible shiver. "I just want to go back to the hospital," she whispered. "Of course," Joanne said, squeezing her gently. She led Emily toward the waiting car, where Detective Tom Willis stood leaning against the passenger door. His presence was steady, like a lighthouse guiding her through a storm. As they approached, Tom opened the door for Emily, and she climbed into the back seat without saying a word. Joanne slid in beside her, and Tom got behind the wheel, glancing at them through the rearview mirror. "You did great today." "Emily," he said as he pulled into traffic. Emily rested her head against the window, watching the buildings blur past. "I don't feel great," she murmured. "I feel tired." "That's normal," Tom said gently. "You've carried a lot of this on your own for so long. Letting it out is exhausting, but it's also the first step to healing." Emily closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. Healing. The word felt foreign, like a language she hadn't learned yet. Could she ever feel whole again, after everything Todd had taken from her? The ride back to the hospital was quiet, but Joanne never let go of her hand, as if silently promising she wouldn't let go of her again. Back in her hospital room, Emily sat on the bed, cradling her stuffed bear in her lap while Joanne unpacked a small bag of clothes and toiletries. The baby lay asleep in the crib, his tiny fingers twitching as he dreamed. The soft hum of the heart monitor and the distant sounds of hospital activity created a strange sense of calm. "Elaine said we'll have a follow-up tomorrow to talk about the trial," Joanne said, setting Emily's favorite sweatshirt on the chair. "But you don't have to think about that today. Just rest, okay?" Emily nodded, but her mind was already racing. The courtroom had been terrifying, but knowing that Todd was still out there, still capable of fighting back, was worse. A knock at the door made her jump. Nurse Carla peeked in, her warm smile immediately easing some of the tension. "I thought you might like some hot chocolate," she said, holding up a tray with 2 steaming mugs. Emily managed a small smile. "Thanks." Carla set the tray on the bedside table and sat down next to her. "You've been the talk of the nurses' station today," she said. "Everyone's proud of you." Emily stirred the hot chocolate, watching the marshmallows melt into the creamy liquid. "I don't feel like a hero," she whispered. Carla tilted her head. "Being a hero isn't about feeling brave. It's about doing the right thing, even when you're scared. And that's exactly what you did." Emily took a small sip, the warmth spreading through her chest like a comforting hug. "What if I'm not strong enough to do this again?" Carla smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Strength isn't about never being scared, Emily. It's about taking one step at a time. Even when you're terrified. And you've already taken the biggest step by telling the truth." Joanne sat down on the other side of Emily, gently stroking her hair. "You don't have to do this alone," she said. "We're all here for you." Emily looked between them, Carla, her mom, and the baby sleeping peacefully nearby. For the first time in a long while, she felt the smallest flicker of safety. That night, as the hospital quieted down, Emily lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The moonlight streamed through the blinds, casting faint shadows on the walls. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the courtroom, Todd's face and the defense lawyer's questions echoing in her head. "Do you think Todd was just trying to discipline you? Maybe he thought you weren't doing a good enough job." Her breathing quickened, and she clutched the blanket tighter, trying to calm herself. But the words wouldn't go away. Her mind replayed the scene over and over, twisting her stomach into knots. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It opened slowly, and Dr. Sarah Winters stepped inside, carrying a small notebook. I saw your light on, she said softly. Can I sit with you for a bit? Emily wiped her eyes and nodded. Okay. Dr. Winters pulled up a chair and sat next to the bed. I know today was hard, she said. Do you want to talk about it? Emily hesitated before nodding. The lawyer made me feel like it was my fault, she whispered. Like maybe I did something wrong. Dr. Winters leaned forward, her expression gentle but serious. What happened to you wasn't your fault. Emily, no matter what Todd or his lawyer says, you didn't deserve any of it. Emily's lip quivered. But I should have fought back. I should have told someone sooner. Dr. Winters reached out and took her hand. It's easy to look back and think about what you could have done differently, but when you're living in fear, it's not that simple. You did the best you could with what you knew at the time, and when the moment came, you saved your brother. That's what matters. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she clutched Dr. Winters' hand. I'm scared I'll never feel normal again. Dr. Winters nodded. That's okay. Healing takes time, but every time you tell your story, every time you take a step forward, you're getting closer to feeling whole again. Emily sniffled, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. Will the nightmares ever stop? They'll get easier, Dr. Winters said, and when they come, you'll have people around you to help. You don't have to fight them alone. Emily's breathing slowed as Dr. Winters' words settled over her like a blanket of reassurance. She wasn't sure if she believed them yet, but for the first time, she thought that maybe she could. After Dr. Winters left, Emily lay back down, the stuffed bear tucked under her arm. She closed her eyes and listened to the soft sounds of the hospital, the distant hum of machines, the faint footsteps of nurses passing by. She still felt the weight of everything she had been through, but beneath it was something new, something small but growing. Hope, and as she drifted off to sleep, she held onto it like a lifeline. The early morning light filtered through the hospital blinds, casting soft beams across Emily's face as she slowly woke up. For the first time in days, her sleep had been uninterrupted. No nightmares. No waking up gasping for breath. But the moment her eyes opened, reality came rushing back like a tidal wave. She lay in bed for a few moments, staring at the ceiling. Today was the day Elaine had mentioned, the trial prep session. She would have to sit in a mock courtroom, go over her testimony again, and answer questions as if she were already on the witness stand. The thought made her stomach twist into knots. A gentle knock at the door pulled her out of her thoughts. Joanne entered carrying a small tray with breakfast, pancakes, scrambled eggs, and a cup of orange juice. Good morning, sweetheart, she said with a warm smile. I figured you could use some energy today. Emily sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around her shoulders like a protective shield. Thanks, she murmured, reaching for the fork. Joanne sat down on the edge of the bed, watching her daughter carefully. How are you feeling? Nervous, Emily admitted, poking at her pancakes. I don't want to mess up. You won't, Joanne said softly. You've already done so much. This is just one more step, and you don't have to do it perfectly. You just have to tell the truth. Emily took a small bite of her pancake, the sweetness doing little to ease the knot in her stomach. What if I freeze like I almost did last time? Joanne gently brushed a strand of hair behind Emily's ear. Then you take a deep breath. Remember how brave you are and keep going. No one's expecting you to be perfect, honey. Just be yourself. Emily nodded, though the doubt lingered. She didn't feel brave. She felt like a balloon stretched too thin, ready to burst at any moment. Later that morning, Elaine and Dr. Sarah Winters arrived to escort Emily to the mock courtroom session. The room was set up to look like a real courtroom, complete with a judge's bench, a witness stand, and rows of wooden benches. The only difference was the absence of a jury, and the comforting fact that Todd Harper wasn't there. Dr. Winters sat beside Emily, her presence steady and calming. Remember, this isn't the real trial, she said gently. This is just practice. If you get stuck, that's okay. We'll work through it together. Emily nodded, clutching the stuffed bear she had insisted on bringing. She followed Elaine to the witness stand, her legs feeling like lead as she climbed into the chair. The seat was too big for her, and her feet dangled above the floor, making her feel even smaller. Elaine stood in front of her with a clipboard, smiling reassuringly. "We're going to start with the easy questions, just like we did in court. What's your name?" "Emily Turner," she replied softly. "How old are you?" 12. "Good," Elaine said. "Now let's talk about the night you left your house. Why did you decide to run away?" Emily's fingers tightened around the bear's paw. "I was scared Todd was going to hurt the baby. He was crying and Todd got mad. He grabbed me and yelled at me, and then he went into the baby's room. I waited until he fell asleep, and then I took the baby and ran." Elaine nodded approvingly. "You're doing great, Emily. Now let's practice the harder questions, the ones Todd's lawyer might ask." Emily's heart pounded, and her palms grew sweaty. "Okay." Elaine cleared her throat, her tone shifting slightly to mimic the cold, calculated voice of a defense attorney. "Emily, you've said that Todd hurt you. But isn't it true that kids sometimes exaggerate when they're upset?" Emily's breath hitched and she looked down at the bear. Dr. Winters leaned in slightly. "Take your time," she whispered. "You know the answer." Emily took a shaky breath. "I'm not exaggerating," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "I'm telling the truth." Elaine nodded, scribbling something on her clipboard. "Isn't it possible that Todd was just trying to discipline you because you weren't doing a good job taking care of the baby?" Emily's jaw tightened, the memory of Todd's grip on her arm flashing through her mind. "No," she said firmly. "He wasn't trying to help. He liked hurting me." Dr. Winters smiled softly, her eyes full of pride. Elaine closed her clipboard and approached the witness stand. "That's exactly what you need to say in court. Emily, you did amazing." Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Really? Really?" Elaine said. "You stayed calm and you answered truthfully. That's all that matters." Dr. Winters stood and placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. "You're stronger than you think, Emily. The courtroom can be intimidating, but you've already shown that you can handle it." As they left the mock courtroom and returned to the hospital, Emily felt a small sense of accomplishment. It wasn't much, but it was enough to carry her through the rest of the day. That evening, as the sun set behind the city skyline, casting a warm orange glow across the room, Joanne sat beside Emily on the bed, flipping through an old photo album. Pictures of birthday parties, family vacations, and holiday dinners filled the pages, each one a snapshot of a time when life had seemed simpler. "Do you remember this?" Joanne asked, pointing to a picture of Emily as a toddler, her face covered in frosting from a birthday cake. Emily smiled faintly. "Yeah, I think that was my 3rd birthday." "It was," Joanne said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "You were so excited about that cake, you wouldn't let anyone else near it." Emily traced the edge of the photo with her finger. "I wish things had stayed like that." Joanne's eyes filled with tears, and she hugged her daughter tightly. "Me too, sweetheart. But we're going to make new memories. Better ones." Emily leaned into the embrace, letting herself believe for just a moment that maybe her mom was right. As the night deepened, Emily lay in bed, the stuffed bear tucked under her arm. Her thoughts drifted back to the mock courtroom and the way she had stood her ground, even when the questions had tried to knock her down. She knew the real trial would be harder. Todd would be there, watching her. But today had proven that she was capable of more than she thought. Maybe, just maybe, she could face him again and win. The morning air outside the hospital was crisp and cool, carrying the faint smell of wet grass after an early drizzle. Emily sat on a bench in the small courtyard, her knees pulled to her chest as she stared at the garden in front of her. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze, bright tulips and daisies that seemed so carefree. Unaware of the storms that raged inside her, Joanne sat beside her, sipping a cup of coffee from the hospital's cafeteria. "It's peaceful out here, isn't it?" she said softly, breaking the silence. Emily nodded but didn't take her eyes off the flowers. "I wish I could feel like that," she murmured. like nothing's wrong. Joanne set her cup down on the bench. I know it's hard, sweetheart, but you've come so far already. You faced the courtroom, you told the truth, and now you're helping make sure Todd can't hurt anyone else. That's something to be proud of. Emily rested her chin on her knees, her fingers picking at the fabric of her jeans. But what if it's not enough? What if they don't believe me? Joanne's heart ached at the fear in her daughter's voice. She reached over and gently tucked a strand of hair behind Emily's ear. You've done everything you could, Emily. The rest is up to the court. But no matter what happens, I'll be right here with you. We'll face it together. Emily didn't respond. The weight of her mother's promises felt both comforting and heavy, like a warm blanket that still couldn't keep out the cold. Inside the hospital, Detective Tom Willis and Elaine Porter met in the conference room, reviewing the final details of the case. The trial was approaching quickly, and the pressure to ensure a conviction was mounting. The stakes were high, not just for Emily, but for her baby brother and Joanne as well. We've got solid evidence, Tom said, tapping the stack of papers in front of him. The bruises, the drawings in the basement, Emily's testimony. But Todd's lawyer is good. He's going to push the narrative that this is all a misunderstanding, that Joanne was an overwhelmed mother and Emily was acting out for attention. Elaine frowned, leaning back in her chair. It's disgusting. But I've seen that strategy work before. If the defense can make the jury doubt even a small part of Emily's story, they could get a reduced sentence, or worse, an acquittal. Tom rubbed his temples. We can't let that happen. If Todd walks free, he'll come after them again. And next time they might not get away. Elaine nodded. We need to make sure Emily is prepared for cross-examination. The defense attorney is going to do everything he can to rattle her. Tom's jaw tightened. She's already been through enough. But I know she's strong. She's proven that over and over. Elaine sighed, flipping through her notes. We'll run through one more mock session tomorrow. But right now, Emily needs rest. We've been pushing her hard and she's just a kid. Tom leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. I just hope the jury sees what we see. A brave little girl who's fighting for her life. That afternoon, Dr. Sarah Winters visited Emily in her room, carrying a small box wrapped in colorful paper. I brought you something, she said with a smile, setting the box on the table beside the bed. Emily tilted her head, curious. What is it? Open it and see, Dr. Winters said, sitting down on the chair. Emily hesitated before peeling back the wrapping paper, revealing a leather-bound journal with a small silver lock on the cover. She traced her fingers over the smooth leather, her eyes widening slightly. It's a journal. Dr. Winters nodded. I thought it might help you. Sometimes writing down your thoughts can be a way to let them out without having to say them out loud. Emily opened the journal, flipping through the blank pages. What do I write about? Anything you want, Dr. Winters said. Your feelings, your fears, even the things you're proud of. There's no right or wrong way to do it. Emily stared at the first blank page, her mind racing with thoughts she didn't know how to organize. What if it just makes me think about all the bad stuff? Doctor. Winters leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. That's okay. Sometimes we have to face the bad stuff before we can move past it. But you can also write about the good things, small victories, things that make you happy, even if it's just a nice day or a good dream. Emily nodded slowly, her fingers brushing over the pages. I'll try. That's all I ask, Dr. Winters said. She stood up and smiled. And if you ever want to share what you've written, I'm here to listen. After Dr. Winters left, Emily sat on the bed, staring at the journal. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the heart monitor and the occasional cooing from the baby in the crib. She picked up a pen and hesitated before writing her first entry. Today I was scared, but I didn't give up. Maybe that's something to be proud of. She closed the journal and hugged it to her chest, a small sense of relief washing over her. That evening, Joanne joined Emily by the window, where they watched the city lights flicker like fireflies in the distance. The hospital felt quieter at night, as if the world outside had slowed down just for them. Do you remember when you were little and we used to sit on the porch and watch the stars? Joanne asked. Emily nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. I liked making wishes. What did you wish for back then? Emily thought for a moment. Mostly for toys or ice cream. She laughed softly. I didn't wish for anything serious. Joanne's eyes glistened with tears. If you could make a wish now, what would it be? Emily hugged her knees to her chest, her gaze fixed on the city lights. I'd wish for him to go away forever, she said quietly. So we could just be normal again. Joanne wrapped her arm around Emily, pulling her close. I know, sweetheart, and we're getting closer to that wish every day. You've been so brave, and because of you, things are changing. Emily rested her head on her mother's shoulder, the weight of the day slowly lifting. She didn't know if her wish would come true, but for the first time she believed it might be possible. As the night deepened and the hospital fell into silence, Emily lay in bed, her stuffed bear tucked under her arm. She thought about the trial, about Todd, and about the future that felt just out of reach. But then she thought about her journal, about the stars she used to wish on, and about the people who were finally standing by her side. Maybe things wouldn't be perfect. Maybe the scars would never fully fade. But as she closed her eyes and drifted off to sleep, she held on to the thought that she had made it this far. And that was something worth holding on to. The courtroom felt heavier today, as though the air itself carried the weight of everything that had yet to be said. Emily sat in the waiting area outside, her small hands folded tightly in her lap, as she listened to the muffled voices coming from beyond the heavy oak doors. Elaine sat beside her, flipping through some notes while Joanne stroked Emily's back gently. You're going to do great, Joanne whispered, her voice warm but firm. Just like last time. You've already faced the hardest part. Emily nodded, though her heart thumped like a drum in her chest. Today was different. Today, Todd would be allowed to sit in the courtroom while she testified. She would feel his eyes on her, even if she didn't look at him. I wish he wasn't there, Emily murmured. Elaine leaned forward, meeting Emily's gaze. Remember what we talked about. You don't have to look at him if you feel scared. Look at me, or the judge, or your mom. We're all here for you. Emily's fingers tightened around the stuffed bear she had brought with her. Okay, she whispered. The door opened, and Detective Tom Willis appeared, his familiar, reassuring presence helping to ease some of the tension in Emily's chest. They're ready for you, he said softly. Joanne kissed the top of Emily's head before standing. We'll be right behind you. Emily stood on shaky legs, clutching her bear like a lifeline as she followed Elaine and Tom into the courtroom. The room was quiet, the only sound coming from the shuffle of papers and the soft creak of the wooden benches. And there he was. Todd Harper sat at the defense table, his posture relaxed as though he were confident he had nothing to fear. His lawyer whispered something to him, and he nodded slightly, never once looking directly at Emily. But she could feel his presence like a cold shadow pressing down on her. Eyes on me, Elaine whispered as she guided Emily to the witness stand. Emily climbed into the seat, her small frame dwarfed by the high wooden barrier surrounding her. The judge, the same woman who had presided over the pre-trial hearing, gave her a kind nod. Emily, do you remember what we talked about last time? Yes. Ma'am, Emily replied, her voice barely audible. Just take your time, the judge said gently. We're in no rush. The prosecutor stood and approached the witness stand, her heels clicking softly against the floor. Good morning, Emily, she said warmly. I know this isn't easy, but you're doing an incredible job. Emily nodded. Gripping the bear tighter, the prosecutor began with the same questions they had practiced during the mock sessions. Simple, direct questions designed to help Emily ease into her testimony. Can you tell us who lives in your house? My mom, my baby brother, and Todd. And when did Todd move in with you? When I was 7, Emily answered. Her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. The questions continued, following a familiar pattern, and for a while, Emily felt like she was back in the mock courtroom. But then the questions shifted. and the memories she had tried so hard to push down began to surface. "Emily, can you tell us about the night you ran away with the baby?" Her breath hitched, and for a moment she couldn't speak. The room felt too small, the walls closing in on her. But then she saw Joanne in the gallery, her eyes filled with tears but full of encouragement. She saw Elaine, giving her a small nod. And she remembered Dr. Winters's words, "Being scared doesn't mean you're not brave." Emily took a deep breath. "The baby was crying," she began. "I tried to calm him down, but Todd came into the room. He yelled at me and grabbed me by the arm." "Do you remember what happened after that?" Emily nodded, her throat tightening. "He told me I was useless. Then he went into the baby's room. And I was scared he was going to hurt him. So I waited until he fell asleep and I took the baby and ran to the hospital." The prosecutor paused, allowing Emily a moment to compose herself. "And was this the first time you were scared of Todd?" Emily shook her head. "No, he hurt me a lot. He would hit me. He pushed me, locked me in the basement." The courtroom fell silent, the weight of her words settling over everyone like a heavy fog. The prosecutor took a step closer, her tone gentle. "Did you ever tell anyone what Todd was doing to you?" "I told my mom once," Emily said, her voice cracking. "But Todd said if I told anyone else, he'd hurt the baby. So I didn't say anything again." "Emily, did Todd ever do anything else that made you feel uncomfortable?" Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she forced herself to answer. "He came into my room at night sometimes. He touched me." Her voice broke and she clutched the bear tighter. "I didn't know what to do." The prosecutor's eyes softened and she nodded. "You're very brave for telling us that, Emily. Thank you." She returned to her seat, and the defense attorney stood, adjusting his tie as he approached the witness stand. Emily's heart pounded as he spoke. "Good morning, Emily," the defense attorney said, his tone polite but cold. "I just have a few questions for you." Emily stared down at the bear, refusing to meet his gaze. "You said that Todd would get angry when the baby cried. But isn't it true that babies cry a lot, and it can be stressful for anyone taking care of them?" Emily's fingers tightened around the bear. "It's not the baby's fault," she said quietly. "I understand," the lawyer said smoothly. "But maybe Todd was just trying to discipline you because he thought you weren't doing a good job." "No," Emily said, her voice stronger now. "He didn't care about helping. He liked hurting me." The lawyer arched an eyebrow. "And how do you know that?" "Because he didn't stop," Emily replied, tears streaming down her face. "Even when I cried, even when I begged him to stop, he didn't care." The defense attorney paused, taken aback by her raw honesty. He nodded once, then returned to his seat without asking any further questions. The judge spoke gently. "Thank you, Emily. You've done an incredible job. You can step down now." Emily climbed down from the witness stand, her legs shaking. Joanne was waiting for her, arms open wide. Emily collapsed into her mother's embrace, sobbing as the weight of her testimony finally lifted. "You did it," Joanne whispered, stroking her hair. "You were amazing." As they left the courtroom, Detective Tom Willis met them at the door. He knelt down in front of Emily, his eyes filled with pride. "I've seen a lot of people testify, Emily, but what you did today, that was something special." Emily wiped her eyes, her breath still shaky. "Do you think they believed me?" "I know they did," Tom said, "and you should be proud of yourself. No matter what happens next, you told your truth, and that's what matters." For the first time, Emily felt something shift inside her. The fear was still there, but so was something stronger. Hope. The car ride back to the hospital was quiet, the hum of the engine filling the silence as Emily leaned her head against the window. The city passed by in a blur, streetlights flickering, people walking briskly along the sidewalks, and cars honking in the distance. It was a normal evening for everyone else. But for Emily, nothing felt normal. Joanne sat beside her in the back seat, occasionally glancing at her daughter with a worried expression. She wanted to say something comforting, but words felt inadequate after the emotional storm Emily had just weathered in the courtroom. Detective Tom Willis drove. his eyes focused on the road, but his mind still lingering on the way Emily had handled the defense's questions. She had been strong, stronger than anyone could have expected, but he could see the exhaustion written all over her small frame. When they arrived at the hospital, Joanne helped Emily out of the car and guided her inside, her arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. The warm, sterile air of the hospital greeted them, and for once it felt like a sanctuary rather than a place of fear. "Let's get you back to your room," Joanne said softly as they made their way to the elevator. Emily didn't respond. Her body felt heavy, like she was moving through water. By the time they reached her room, she could barely keep her eyes open. Joanne helped her change into her pajamas and tucked her into bed, smoothing the blanket over her. "I'm proud of you, Emily," Joanne whispered, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I know today was hard, but you did something amazing." Emily stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying the courtroom scene over and over. "Do you think it's really over?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Joanne hesitated before answering. "It's not over yet, but you've done your part. Now it's up to the court." Emily's eyes welled with tears. What if they let him go? Joanne's heart ached at the fear in her daughter's voice. "We're not going to let that happen," she said firmly. "No matter what the court decides, I won't let him come near you or the baby ever again." Emily turned onto her side, clutching the stuffed bear tightly. "I'm scared." "Mom." "I know, sweetheart," Joanne whispered, stroking her hair. "But you're not alone anymore. We're going to get through this." In the hallway outside Emily's room, Tom leaned against the wall, speaking quietly into his phone. "I need the final report on Todd's financial records by tomorrow," he said to the investigator on the other end of the line. "Anything that shows control or manipulation over Joanne or the kids. We need to seal this case tight." He ended the call just as Elaine Porter approached, carrying a folder under her arm. "How is she?" Elaine asked, nodding toward Emily's room. "She's exhausted," Tom replied, running a hand through his hair. "But she did everything we needed her to do today. Now it's on us to make sure Todd doesn't slip through the cracks." Elaine opened the folder and handed Tom a few pages. "We just got this from the medical team. There's no physical evidence of injury to the baby, which is good for his health, but it means we can't use that as additional proof of danger." Tom frowned, flipping through the pages. "That's a setback, but we still have Emily's testimony, the drawings, and the history of abuse." "We'll make it work," Elaine said confidently. "We have to." Tom nodded, his jaw tightening. "Let's double-check everything before we head into closing arguments. If Todd's lawyer tries anything sneaky, I want to be ready." The next morning, the sun streamed through the window of Emily's hospital room, casting warm light on the walls. She sat cross-legged on the bed, her journal open in her lap. The pages were filled with messy handwriting, tear stains smudging some of the words. "I told the truth, she wrote. "I said everything I was supposed to say, but I still feel scared. What if he gets out? What if I have to live with this forever?" She paused, tapping the pen against the page. A knock at the door made her look up, and Dr. Sarah Winters entered with a warm smile. "Good morning, Emily," Dr. Winters said, pulling a chair closer to the bed. "How are you feeling today?" Emily shrugged. "I don't know. Tired, I guess." Dr. Winters nodded. "That makes sense. You've been through a lot." She glanced at the journal. "Do you want to share what you've been writing about?" Emily hesitated before closing the journal. "I'm just scared. I know I did what everyone wanted me to do, but what if it's not enough?" Dr. Winters leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "It's normal to feel that way, especially after facing something as big as what you did yesterday. But I want you to remember that being scared doesn't mean you're weak. It means you care about what happens next, and that's a sign of strength." Emily wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. "I don't feel strong." "You don't have to feel it all the time," Dr. Winters said gently. "Sometimes, just getting through the day is enough. And you've done more than that. You've taken huge steps toward healing." Emily sniffled, her fingers tracing the edge of the journal. "I want to feel normal again, like before Todd moved in." Dr. Winters smiled softly. It might take some time, but you'll get there. And you're not alone. You have your mom, your baby brother, Detective Willis, and me. We're all here to help you." Emily nodded, a small flicker of hope sparking inside her. "Do you really think Todd will go to jail?" "I do," Dr. Winter said firmly. "And even if the court doesn't give us the outcome we want, we'll make sure you and your brother are protected." The reassurance eased some of the tension in Emily's chest, and she took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. "Okay," she whispered. That evening, Joanne sat by Emily's bed reading from one of her favorite childhood books. The familiar story of a brave girl who faced a dragon filled the room, and for a brief moment, Emily let herself get lost in the tale. When the story ended, Joanne closed the book and kissed Emily's forehead. "I love you," she said softly. "I love you too, Mom," Emily replied, her voice filled with a mix of vulnerability and trust. As Joanne turned off the light and left the room, Emily lay in the darkness, listening to the gentle hum of the hospital around her. The fear was still there, lurking like a shadow. But so was the hope. She hugged her bear tightly and whispered to herself, "I told the truth. That has to count for something." And as she drifted off to sleep, she held on to that thought like a lifeline, hoping it would guide her toward a future where Todd was nothing but a distant memory. The courthouse buzzed with energy the following morning. Its marble halls filled with the murmurs of lawyers, journalists, and families waiting for their turn in court. The smell of freshly brewed coffee wafted from a nearby vending station, but Emily barely noticed any of it. She sat on a bench outside the courtroom, her legs swinging slightly as she clutched her stuffed bear against her chest. Her mom sat next to her, holding her hand tightly, while Detective Tom Willis and Elaine Porter stood nearby, quietly discussing the closing argument scheduled for today. Emily knew what the day meant. This was it, the final step before the jury would decide. Her stomach churned with nerves, her mind racing with every possible outcome. "What if they let him go?" Emily whispered, barely loud enough for Joanne to hear. Joanne squeezed her hand. "No matter what happens, you're not going back to that life. I promise you, sweetheart. We'll be okay." Tom stepped over, his voice warm and steady. "She's right, Emily. Even if the jury takes time to decide, you've already done more than enough. You've given them the truth, and that's what matters." Emily looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "But what if the truth isn't enough?" Tom crouched down so they were at eye level. "It is," he said firmly, "and you've been stronger than anyone should ever have to be. I know this is scary, but you're not alone. We're with you." The courtroom doors opened and an officer motioned for them to enter. Joanne helped Emily to her feet, and they walked inside together, the room feeling larger and more overwhelming than ever before. As they took their seats, Emily's eyes darted toward the defense table, where Todd Harper sat with his lawyer. He looked calm, too calm, as if he didn't have a care in the world. But when his eyes briefly met Emily's, she quickly looked away, focusing instead on the wooden grain of the bench in front of her. The judge entered, and the courtroom fell silent as the bailiff called the session to order. The prosecutor began her closing arguments, standing confidently in front of the jury. Her voice was steady, carrying the weight of everything Emily had shared over the past few days. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "this case is about more than just bruises and broken bones. It's about the lasting damage caused by abuse and the bravery of a young girl who refused to stay silent. Emily Turner didn't just tell us what happened. She showed us. Her drawings, her testimony, and her courage all paint a clear picture of the abuse she endured." Emily listened intently, her heart pounding as the prosecutor continued. "Abusers like Todd Harper thrive on fear. They manipulate their victims into silence, making them believe that no one will believe them or help them. But Emily broke that silence. She ran when she knew it was the only way to protect her baby brother. And now, she's asking you to believe her." The prosecutor turned to the jury, her eyes scanning each member. "This case isn't just about punishing Todd Harper for what he did. It's about protecting Emily and ensuring she never has to live in fear again. We ask that you find him guilty, not just for the bruises on her skin, but for the scars he's left on her heart. As the prosecutor returned to her seat, Joanne leaned over and whispered in Emily's ear, "She's fighting for you, sweetheart, just like we are." Next, Todd's defense attorney stood, buttoning his jacket as he approached the jury. His tone was smooth, his words carefully chosen. "Ladies and gentlemen, no one is denying that Emily had a difficult experience. But we must ask ourselves, is Todd Harper truly responsible for everything she claims?" He paced slowly in front of the jury, pausing for effect. Children can be imaginative and memories can be distorted under stress. We have to consider the possibility that Emily's testimony, while heartfelt, may not be entirely accurate. Emily's breath quickened, and her grip on the bear tightened. The lawyer continued, "Todd Harper was a stepfather doing his best in a difficult situation. Babies cry, children misbehave. Discipline is sometimes necessary. What Emily perceived as abuse may have been nothing more than a strict parenting style." Elaine placed a comforting hand on Emily's shoulder as the defense attorney wrapped up his argument. "Before you make your decision," the lawyer concluded, "I urge you to consider the lack of physical evidence. There were no significant injuries to the baby. The medical reports don't prove long-term harm. And perhaps most importantly, we have Joanne Harper's initial failure to report any abuse as an indication that things may not have been as severe as they seem." The lawyer returned to his seat. Satisfied with his performance, Emily's stomach twisted into knots. The judge instructed the jury on the legal standards they needed to consider before reaching a verdict, then dismissed them to begin deliberations. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Emily sat on a bench, staring at the floor as the weight of everything settled on her. "How long will it take them to decide?" she asked quietly. Tom sat next to her. "There's no way to know for sure. It could be hours, maybe even a day or two." Emily's shoulders slumped. She had expected that answer, but hearing it out loud made the weight feel even heavier. Joanne knelt in front of her, taking both of her daughter's hands in hers. "I know it's hard, but we'll get through this together. No matter what the jury decides, you've already won, Emily. You stood up to him, and that's something no one can take away from you." Emily nodded, though the ache in her chest didn't go away. "I just want it to be over." Hours passed as they waited in the courthouse lounge, the ticking clock on the wall marking each agonizing minute. Emily tried to distract herself by drawing in her journal, but her hand trembled too much to keep the lines straight. Joanne rubbed her back, whispering words of comfort that barely registered. Finally, the bailiff appeared at the doorway. "The jury has reached a verdict." Emily's heart skipped a beat, and she clutched Joanne's hand tightly as they made their way back into the courtroom. The room felt colder now, the silence deafening as the jury filed in. The judge addressed the foreperson. "Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict?" "We have." "Your Honor." Emily held her breath, her entire body tense as she waited for the words that would determine her future. The foreperson unfolded a piece of paper, her voice steady as she read aloud. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Todd Harper, guilty on all counts." The words hit Emily like a wave, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. Tears streamed down her face as Joanne pulled her into a tight embrace, whispering, "You did it, sweetheart. You did it." Tom wiped his eyes discreetly before giving Elaine a nod. They had done it. Todd Harper would finally face the consequences of his actions. As the judge thanked the jury and dismissed the court, Emily sat quietly, overwhelmed by a mix of relief, exhaustion, and disbelief. Joanne cupped her daughter's face in her hands. "We're free, Emily. He can't hurt us anymore." Emily nodded, her tears falling freely. For the first time in what felt like forever, the weight on her chest began to lift. The scars were still there, but for the first time, they didn't feel like chains. As they left the courtroom and stepped into the cool evening air, Emily looked up at the sky where the first stars were beginning to appear. She didn't make a wish this time. She didn't need to. Because for the first time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, she was free. The courthouse steps felt different under Emily's feet this time. Instead of the weight of fear pressing down on her, There was a sense of lightness, as if her legs could finally carry her without the constant burden of dread. She held Joanne's hand tightly as they walked down the stairs, the cool evening breeze brushing against her face. Reporters gathered near the entrance, their cameras flashing as they shouted questions. "Emily, how do you feel about the verdict? Mrs. Harper, what's next for your family? Do you believe justice has been served?" Joanne guided Emily past them, her hand never leaving her daughter's. "No comments," she said firmly, shielding Emily from the frenzy of attention. Tom and Elaine flanked them, making sure the reporters didn't get too close. When they reached the car, Tom opened the back door, and Emily slid inside, clutching her stuffed bear against her chest. Joanne followed, closing the door behind her as Tom and Elaine stood by, ensuring the reporters stayed back. As the car pulled away from the courthouse, Emily leaned her head against the window, watching the city lights blur past. "Is it really over now?" she asked softly. Joanne wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Yes, sweetheart, it's over." Emily nodded, though part of her still struggled to believe it. After years of living in fear, the idea of freedom felt foreign, like a dream she wasn't sure she was allowed to have. Tom glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "You did something incredible today. Emily, you stood up to him, and now he's going to pay for what he did. But what if he doesn't stay in jail forever?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What if he comes back?" "He won't," Tom assured her. "The charges he's been convicted of are serious. He's facing a long sentence, and by the time he gets out, if he ever does, you'll be grown up, living your life far away from him, and we'll make sure you're protected." Emily's fingers traced the stitching on her bear. "I just want to feel safe." "You will," Joanne whispered, kissing the top of her head. "We'll take it one day at a time, but we're going to get there." Back at the hospital, the room felt warmer, cozier than it had in days. The nurses had left a small card and a bouquet of daisies on Emily's bedside table, congratulating her on her bravery. Emily sat on the bed, flipping through the card, the simple messages of support bringing a small smile to her lips. Dr. Sarah Winters entered the room, her presence as calming as ever. "I heard the news," she said, pulling up a chair next to the bed. "How are you feeling?" "I don't know," Emily admitted. "Happy, I think, but also scared." "That's normal," Dr. Winters said. "You've been living in survival mode for a long time. It's going to take time to adjust to the idea of safety." Emily hugged her bear tightly. "What if I never stop being scared?" "You will," Dr. Winters said gently. "But it won't happen overnight. Healing is a process, and it's okay to feel a mix of emotions. The important thing is to give yourself grace." Joanne sat down on the bed, stroking Emily's hair. "We're going to work through this together. No more secrets, no more hiding. Just us being honest with each other." Emily blinked back tears. "Do you promise?" "I promise," Joanne said, her voice firm. "I'll never let you go through anything like this alone again." Dr. Winters leaned forward, her expression warm. "Do you remember when we talked about making a list of things that make you feel safe? I think it's a good time to start." She handed Emily a small notepad and a pen. "You don't have to do it all at once. Just write down whatever comes to mind." Emily hesitated before writing her first entry. Mom being here, the baby sleeping next to me, my stuffed bear, the journal Dr. Winters gave me. She looked up at Dr. Winters. "What if I run out of things to write?" "You won't," Dr. Winters said with a soft laugh. "As you start healing, you'll find more and more things that bring you comfort. And on the hard days, you can come back to this list and remind yourself that you're not alone." Emily nodded. Adding another item to the list, Detective Willis telling me I'm strong. That night, after Joanne had tucked her in and kissed her goodnight, Emily lay in bed with her bear nestled against her chest. The baby slept peacefully in the crib, his tiny breaths creating a soothing rhythm that lulled her closer to sleep. But just as she began to drift off, a flash of memory jolted her awake. Todd's voice, the cold look in his eyes, the feeling of his hand gripping her arm. Her chest tightened, and she gasped for breath, her heart racing as fear gripped her. She sat up, tears streaming down her face as she hugged her bear tightly. The shadows in the room felt too big, too close. Panic swelled in her chest until a knock on the door startled her. Joanne entered, her face filled with concern. "I heard you crying, sweetheart. What's wrong?" Emily sobbed into her mother's arms, her words tumbling out between gasps. I saw him in my head. I couldn't make it stop." Joanne rocked her gently, stroking her hair. "It's okay, Emily, I'm here. It was just a memory. He can't hurt you anymore." "But it felt so real," Emily whispered. "What if it never goes away?" Joanne wiped her tears and looked her in the eyes. "It will get easier. You're safe now. And whenever you feel like this, you can come to me. You don't have to face it alone." Emily sniffled, her breathing slowly evening out as Joanne continued to hold her. "Can you stay with me until I fall asleep?" "Of course," Joanne said softly. She climbed into the bed next to Emily, wrapping her arms around her and humming a lullaby she used to sing when Emily was little. As the lullaby filled the room, the shadows seemed to retreat, and Emily's eyelids grew heavy. The memory of Todd faded into the background, replaced by the warmth of her mother's embrace and the sound of her baby brother's gentle breathing. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily believed that maybe, just maybe, she could sleep without fear. And as she drifted off, she whispered to herself, "I'm safe now." The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting soft beams of light onto the hospital walls. Emily stretched under the blankets, blinking as the warmth of the sun touched her face. For the first time in weeks, she hadn't woken up from a nightmare. The heaviness in her chest was still there, but it was lighter, like the weight of a storm that had passed, leaving behind only a few lingering clouds. Joanne was sitting by the crib, gently rocking the baby, who was giggling at the jingling keys she dangled in front of him. When she noticed Emily stirring, she smiled. "Good morning, sweetheart." "Morning," Emily mumbled, rubbing her eyes. "How did you sleep?" Joanne asked, her tone hopeful. "Better," Emily admitted, sitting up and hugging her knees to her chest. "I didn't have any bad dreams." Joanne's eyes softened with relief. "That's a good sign." Emily nodded, though a flicker of doubt still lingered. "Do you think it'll always be like this? Will the nightmares really go away?" "They will," Joanne said, standing and placing the baby back in his crib. She sat down next to Emily on the bed and brushed a strand of hair out of her face. "It won't happen overnight, but it'll get easier. And when it feels hard, I'll be right here." Emily leaned into her mother's embrace, letting herself absorb the warmth of her words. It was still hard to trust that things could be okay, but she wanted to believe it. A few hours later, Detective Tom Willis arrived at the hospital, knocking softly on the door before stepping inside. His warm smile immediately eased some of Emily's nerves. "How's my favorite hero today?" Emily blushed and smiled shyly. "I'm okay." "Just okay?" Tom teased, pulling a small box out of his coat pocket. "Well, I think I've got something that might make your day better." He handed the box to her, and she opened it to find a gold necklace with a small charm shaped like a star. "It's beautiful," Emily whispered, tracing the charm with her fingers. Tom sat down in the chair next to the bed. "I figured you could use a reminder that you're a star no matter what. You've done something that most adults would be terrified to do. And you didn't just do it, you did it with courage." Emily felt tears welling up, but this time they weren't tears of fear or sadness. "Thank you. You earned it," Tom said. "The court sentencing is tomorrow, but no matter what happens, I want you to know that you've already won. Todd can't hurt you or your brother anymore. He lost." Joanne reached over and squeezed Emily's hand. "And we'll be there with you tomorrow. You don't have to do this alone." Emily's heart raced at the mention of the sentencing. She had thought the trial was the hardest part, but knowing that tomorrow would be the day the judge decided Todd's fate made her stomach twist with anxiety. What if the judge goes easy on him? Tom's gaze was steady. "That's always a possibility, but we've built a strong case. And even if the sentence isn't as long as we hope, Todd won't be able to come near you. Restraining orders, supervised parole, whatever it takes. We'll make sure you stay safe." Emily nodded, her fingers still playing with the star charm on the necklace. "I just want him gone." "He will be," Tom assured her, "and you've got a whole team making sure of that." That afternoon, Dr. Sarah Winters arrived for one last session before the sentencing. She sat cross-legged in the chair across from Emily, who was curled up on the bed with her journal. "How are you feeling about tomorrow?" Dr. Winters asked. "Scared," Emily admitted, "but not as much as I was before. I think I'm ready." "That's a big step," Dr. Winters said with a proud smile. "It's okay to feel nervous. Even people who've been through less than you would be anxious. But you've done everything you can to take back control of your life, and that's what matters." Emily flipped open her journal and showed Dr. Winters the list of things that made her feel safe. The list had grown over the past few days. Mom being here, the baby sleeping next to me, my stuffed bear, Detective Willis telling me I'm strong, the star necklace, not waking up from a nightmare. "That's a wonderful list," Dr. Winters said, tracing her finger over the last entry. "And you're right. Those moments, like waking up without a nightmare, are signs of healing. You're on the right track." "Emily." Emily looked up from the journal, her brow furrowed. "Do you think I'll ever forget everything?" Dr. Winters' expression softened. "You may not forget completely, but that doesn't mean the memories will always hurt. Over time, they'll lose their power. The pain won't define you. It'll just be a part of your story." "When you overcame," Emily nodded, closing the journal. "I hope you're right." "I am," Dr. Winters said confidently. "And you've already proven that you're capable of healing. Remember, healing isn't about pretending nothing bad happened. It's about learning to live a full life despite it." As evening fell, the hospital grew quiet, the dim glow of the city lights casting shadows across the room. Joanne sat beside Emily, reading a bedtime story aloud while the baby cooed softly in the crib. The warmth of her mother's voice, combined with the familiar comfort of the story, lulled Emily into a sense of calm. When Joanne finished the story, she kissed Emily's forehead and tucked the blanket around her. "Try to get some rest, sweetheart. Tomorrow's a big day, but you're ready." Emily nodded, yawning as her eyes grew heavy. "Will you stay with me until I fall asleep?" "Of course," Joanne said, settling into the chair next to the bed. As the room fell into a peaceful silence, Emily clutched her stuffed bear and closed her eyes. Her thoughts drifted to the courtroom, to the moment when she had told her truth despite the fear. She remembered Todd's face, but this time, it didn't hold the same power over her. She was stronger now. As sleep claimed her, she held onto the star necklace around her neck, its warmth a reminder that she had made it through the worst. And tomorrow, she would walk into that courtroom one last time. Not as a victim, but as a survivor. The morning was crisp and clear, the sun casting a golden glow over the courthouse as Emily stepped out of the car, her hand tightly wrapped in Joanne's. The sound of distant traffic and the chatter of passers-by filled the air, but to Emily it all felt muted. Her heartbeat thumped loudly in her ears, drowning out the world around her. Joanne knelt in front of her, brushing a loose strand of hair behind Emily's ear. "You don't have to be scared, sweetheart," she said softly. "Today is about closure. We're here to see this through, and then we can start fresh." Emily nodded, but her fingers trembled as she adjusted the star necklace around her neck. She had worn it every day since Tom had given it to her, using its warmth to ground her when the fear became too much. Tom Willis and Elaine Porter met them at the courthouse steps, both offering warm, encouraging smiles. "How's my favorite hero today?" Tom asked. "Nervous," Emily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's okay," Tom said, crouching down to her level. "Courage doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep going even when you are." Elaine nodded. "And you've already done the hardest part, Emily. Today is just about seeing it through." Joanne squeezed her hand. "Let's go, honey. We're almost at the finish line." Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was solemn. The wooden benches, the polished floors, and the high ceilings seemed larger than life, but Emily wasn't as overwhelmed as she had been before. She sat between Joanne and Elaine, her hands folded neatly in her lap as she stared at the front of the room where the judge would soon enter. Todd Harper sat at the defense table, his posture stiff and his gaze fixed straight ahead. His lawyer leaned in, whispering something to him, but Todd didn't respond. Emily didn't look at him for long. She didn't need to. Today wasn't about him. It was about her family, and the freedom she had fought so hard to reclaim. The judge entered, and the room fell silent as the sentencing hearing began. The prosecutor spoke first, recounting the evidence presented during the trial: the bruises, Emily's testimony, the drawings on the basement walls, and the long history of emotional and physical abuse. "Emily Turner's courage has brought us here today," the prosecutor said, her voice strong and clear. She stood up to her abuser and told the world the truth. "We ask that the court impose the maximum sentence allowed by law to ensure that Todd Harper can no longer inflict pain on this family or anyone else." When the prosecutor sat down, Todd's lawyer stood, adjusting his tie as he addressed the court. His tone was less confident than it had been during the trial, as though even he knew the battle had been lost. "While we respect the court's decision, we request leniency in sentencing, considering Mr. Harper's lack of a prior criminal record. He acknowledges that mistakes were made and expresses remorse." Emily's fists clenched at the word remorse. Todd hadn't apologized. He hadn't shown a single ounce of regret during the trial. The only thing he regretted was getting caught. When the defense lawyer finished, the judge looked over her notes before addressing the courtroom. Her voice was steady, carrying the weight of her authority. "Before I deliver my sentence, I understand that the victim, Emily Turner, would like to make a statement." Joanne gently nudged Emily and Elaine gave her a reassuring nod. Taking a deep breath, Emily stood and walked to the podium at the front of the courtroom. Her legs felt wobbly, but she kept moving, her hand clutching the star necklace as if it could transfer its strength to her. When she reached the podium, she looked out at the courtroom. Her gaze briefly flicked to Todd, but she quickly focused on the judge. "My name is Emily Turner," she began, her voice soft but growing stronger with each word. "For a long time, I was scared of Todd Harper. I thought if I told anyone what he was doing to me, they wouldn't believe me. Or if they did, it wouldn't matter. He made me feel small, like I didn't have a voice." Her voice wavered for a moment, and she took another deep breath, feeling Joanne's eyes on her, willing her to keep going. "But I found my voice," Emily continued, her gaze steady now. "And I told the truth. Todd Harper hurt me, he hurt my family, and for a long time I thought I'd never be okay again. But I'm learning that I can heal. I don't have to be afraid anymore." She glanced briefly at Todd, her stomach twisting but her resolve steady. "I want him to stay in jail for a long time. I want to know that he can't hurt me or my brother or anyone else, and I want him to know that he didn't break me." Emily stepped back from the podium, tears streaming down her face. But they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of release. Joanne stood and hugged her tightly as they returned to their seats. The judge cleared her throat, her expression thoughtful. "Thank you, Emily. Your courage is remarkable." She paused, glancing between the prosecutor and the defense lawyer. "This court has considered all the evidence, the statements made today, and the impact on the victim and her family. The harm inflicted was severe and long-lasting, and Mr. Harper's lack of genuine remorse is concerning." The room was silent, every breath held in anticipation. "I hereby sentence Todd Harper to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole for the first 20 years, the judge declared. "This sentence reflects the gravity of his actions and the need to protect this family and society from further harm." Joanne's breath hitched, and she hugged Emily tightly as the weight of the judge's words sank in. Todd Harper was going to prison, where he couldn't hurt them anymore. Tom leaned over and whispered to Emily, "You did it, kid. You're free." As the court was adjourned and people began to file out, Emily sat in her seat, her fingers still clutching the star necklace. Joanne knelt in front of her, tears streaming down her face. "It's over, sweetheart. We're safe." Emily nodded, her tears falling freely. I believe you. That evening, back at the hospital, the sunset painted the room in shades of orange and pink. Joanne sat on the bed beside Emily, holding her close as they watched the baby sleep peacefully in his crib. "Do you want to write in your journal tonight?" Joanne asked. Emily smiled softly and shook her head. "Not tonight. I just want to be here with you." Joanne kissed her forehead. "I'm so proud of you, Emily. You're the bravest person I know." Emily snuggled closer to her mom, letting the warmth of the moment wrap around her like a blanket. The fear wasn't completely gone. It would take time. But for the first time, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. As the stars began to twinkle outside the window, she touched the charm around her neck and whispered, "I'm free." And this time, she believed it.